Good evening, members. Please be seated. Thank you. As usual, this meeting is being webcast so that residents and other members of the public have the chance to see it live or to view it on demand later if they so wish. I just want to run through some housekeeping issues. In the unlikely event of an emergency requiring us to evacuate the building, please make yourselves aware of the emergency exits and follow the instructions of the security staff who are present in this building this evening. As usual, I would remind everyone to continue to behave respectfully and appropriately. I would like us to have a good, productive debate tonight with as many members as possible getting the opportunity to have their say. I would also like to remind members at this stage that the guillotine will fall 3 hours and 40 minutes after the start of the meeting. I intend to have one break tonight during our meeting at an appropriate point for approximately 15 minutes. We will now move on with our meeting, which I hope will be clear and constructive. First of all, do I have any apologies? I have received apologies this evening from Councillor Galvin. Are there any other apologies to report, please? Councillor Webb.
It's now working. Councillor Barnes and Councillor Pavlovic.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Are there any others? No. Okay. Thank you. Mobile phones. Can I remind members and officers to please turn your mobile phones to silent and to mute any other electronic equipment for the duration of the council meeting. Conduct of the meeting, can I remind everyone, as usual, to speak clearly during debate and to use your microphones. Can you also please remember to switch off your microphone after speaking, otherwise we may have the same issue that we had at the last meeting where people can't be heard through the microphones. Please indicate that you wish to speak by raising your hand. I will then call upon you to speak at the appropriate time. To help us get through business effectively tonight, I'd be grateful if we could keep the meeting focused and to the point. I will keep us on track if I do feel we are losing focus. Item 1, declarations of interest. May I ask all members who have a personal, prejudicial or disclosable pecuniary interest in any of the business to be discussed at tonight's meeting to declare your interests now, if you have not already done so in advance on the register of interests. Do I have any? Councillor Doughty.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just out of transparency, really, in relation to the motion that's going to be presented by Councillor Pearson on the council backing Haxby Station, in terms of I've recently taken early retirement from the railway. I don't believe it's any kind of prejudicial interest. Thank you.
Thank you. That's noted, Councillor Doughty. Anyone else? No. Approval of last meeting's minutes. Do I have members' approval to sign the minutes of the Budget Council meeting held on the 23rd of February 2023? Yes. Thank you very much indeed. Now, a couple of civic announcements. Will indulge me. We have received a number of gifts. I have received a number of gifts on behalf of the council. One is a portrait painted by a soldier who was wounded in the present Ukraine-Russian war, where art is one of the rehabilitation issues that wounded soldiers are asked to do. The other one is a folk ornament from the people of Thailand, with whom I had a reception at the university a couple of weeks ago. Now, Councillor John Galvin, I want to mention this, please. Councillor John Galvin is unable to be with us tonight, and it would have been his last full council. John, I'm afraid to say, has COVID, and his wife, Val, is hospitalised with serious health issues. As many of you know, John has served this council over many years and is liked and respected across the chamber. So please, members, will you allow me to indulge council's patience and compassion by reading out this short message from Councillor John Galvin. It starts, Lord Mayor, members of council, it is indeed unfortunate that after some 3 years, COVID has finally caught up with me, resulting in my being unable to attend what would have been my final council meeting as a city councillor. It is with mixed emotion that I finally retire from public life, having spent most of the last 50 years being connected in one way or another to local government, and I will certainly miss my activity as a member of City Council, along with my activity within the ward I was honoured to represent. I have over the years met many committed and remarkable councillors from all sides of the political arena, and none more so than here in York. I have met and been helped in my work as a councillor by excellent and helpful staff, not only as a councillor, but also during the times I have chaired committees. And to those staff, I say a big thank you, for without your help and guidance, I suspect I would have fallen by the wayside. The highlight in my role as councillor was quite clearly when I held the office of the Right Honourable Lord Mayor of York, an honour which I will cherish for the rest of my life, be that a short time or a comparatively longer time. It was during my time as Lord Mayor that I really began to understand the importance of York's history, of its traditions, of its future, and lastly but not least, the people who inhabit this wonderful city. May I wish those members who are standing down from council very best wishes for the future. To those seeking re-election, all best wishes. There will of course be those of you that won't make it, so best wishes to those too. May I finally make the plea to those of you who are returned in May, along with the new members, that you and they will continue to respect the history of this wonderful city. More importantly, I passionately hope that the new council will continue to wholeheartedly support the traditions and customs of the city, customs and traditions going back over hundreds of years, which must be kept alive for the future. Thank you all for your friendship, and as Dave Allen would say, for those of you who remember Dave Allen, may your God walk with you and bless you. That is the end of Councillor Galvin's message. Thank you for that tribute, members. Thank you. We now move on to public participation, item 4. And I want to take, I think it's Mr. and Mrs. Kilfeather first because of logistic issues. Sorry, it's Mr. and Miss Kilfeather. I do beg your pardon.
Good evening. My name is Ivan Kilfeather, and this is Aoife, and she's brought her dog Noddy with her. And we wanted to talk to council about Aoife's very difficult year in school with school refusal, and how some really excellent support from her school has meant that she's able to attend again school full time. And we just wanted to share her story with you so that you could support the council to support children with special educational needs. Aoife is in year 5 in Scarcroft School, and when she was in year 3, after a few instances of unkindness in the playground, she found she was unable to go to school. She was very anxious and upset, and at first we tried to persuade her to go into school with a bit of coercion, and you wanted to say how that made you feel, Aoife.
So one time I got dragged into school, and if I got told that I had to go into school, like I felt like I was put under pressure, and it really didn't help me, and it just made me feel worse.
Over that summer holiday, Aoife's anxiety increased and she wasn't able to sleep, and she started to say things at home that I was very worried about and her GP was very worried about, and she had a referral to CAMHS at that point. And we told her she didn't have to attend school if she really didn't want to. And in September, her anxiety still stayed very high and she was unable to go in. So what, with the agreement of the school, I went to school with Aoife just for half an hour each morning. We read in the library together. So she still came into the building each day in her uniform and retained that connection with school. And then just before half term, Aoife saw an advertisement for a special Halloween day.
So there were 2 days before Halloween, half term, and I went in for the full day with my mum and stayed in school. And then I did that this next day, and I felt so proud of myself because I actually had been into school for the full day with my mum.
And after the half term, then Aoife met with the Centco in Scarcroft, Carol Dixon. And you can talk about that, Aoife.
So I went for a meeting, and Mrs. Dixon knew how much I love dogs, and she gave me Noddy to take to school with me every day. And then after the Christmas holiday, Noddy sent a letter to Mrs. Dixon and asking if I could adopt him. And Mrs. Dixon wrote a letter back saying if I went into school by myself for a couple of days, maybe a week, and then I could adopt Noddy. And I really, really wanted to adopt Noddy. So it kind of set me a nice goal, but in a way that I didn't feel forced to do it.
Yeah, and Aoife was also supported with, she had a personalised support plan with pictures of Noddy on and tiny steps that started with me just sitting outside the classroom and checking her every 10 minutes, then being in the library across the hall and so on. But it was very, very gradual, and it took a whole school year for Aoife to be able to go into the building by herself and to attend school. And we wanted to tell you that because of the amount of support that the school needed to provide a child with special educational needs to re-attend school. And Aoife is now doing very well academically and is doing stretch exercises in class. So she's achieving very well. She's socially doing very well, but there were a lot of supports. Critical to that was her relationship with the special educational needs coordinator, who she still visits every day and talks to, and sometimes has lunch with. She has a one-to-one session in the nest for emotional kind of dealing with difficult feelings. And she also has a group every week in the nest where she meets with other children so that they can develop friendships. That and the council also supported by the wellbeing worker, Kathy Jones, saw Aoife for a while as well. So it's taken a really large amount of resource from family and from school. But I think you'll agree it's a good thing that Aoife is attending school and is able to do so. But her attendance is still somewhat fragile, so she's a sensitive child, and so things that happen in school can sometimes unsettle her. And so continuing support for children like Aoife, and there are many children like Aoife in school who need plenty of support. And crucial for Aoife, I believe, is her transition to secondary school. So Aoife is now in year 5. Her school refusal year was mostly year 4, but she has a big transition in a year's time, and that needs to be handled very well by the secondary school that she'll go to, and she needs to have relationships with adults in that school. And gradually that will lessen, of course, over time, but certainly we expect that in the coming year, Aoife will continue to need some support, and it would be great if the council could support schools and encourage schools to provide support to children with special educational needs. And I think that's, do you have anything else to add, Aoife, or?
No.
Or does Noddy have anything to add?
I don't think so.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. and Miss Kilfeather. Just to clarify for members, both those individuals were allocated 3 minutes each to speak. And of course, they were speaking in regard to motion 3 SEN support. And I'm hopeful that you understand why I took them out of turn. I think the reasons are quite obvious. Right, we now move back to our second speaker who is speaking to us remotely. And this is Flick Williams, who would like to speak on the report of the Scrutiny Chair at agenda item 11. Flick Williams, you've got 3 minutes, please.
As this is the last meeting of both the municipal year and the electoral term, my topic is again scrutiny. I concur with everything in the report before you. If you continue to operate a system of cabinet governance, it is imperative that the scrutiny committees are properly resourced and given the priority they deserve in holding the executive to account. You cannot have an open and effective council without. They are the mechanism by which the council services and decisions can be properly interrogated. Because whilst positivity is important in facing the many challenges presented in our city, it is all too easy for that positivity to tip over into talking everything up to a point at which it becomes nothing more than propaganda and hype, with the resultant danger that members of the public feel that the council has become totally out of touch with the harsh realities down on the streets and in the homes, workplaces and neighbourhoods of citizens. I'm most appreciative of having twice had a temporary seat at the table at scrutiny meetings, first representing York Disability Rights Forum and just this week on behalf of the Bus Forum. Both these meetings, where stakeholders directly concerned with the issues were invited to contribute, did, in my opinion, lead to a much more comprehensive and in-depth interrogation of the topics under discussion. I very much hope that the new chairs of scrutiny committees will retain and build upon this model of community involvement. When it comes to pre-decision scrutiny, I'm afraid this was used very cynically by the executive to push through an extremely unpopular and controversial decision to end the blue badge holder exemption to the foot streets. The council breached its own procedures and standing orders by circulating papers late, and members in the meeting admitted to not having read them before the decision was pushed through, and calling in thereby prevented. A decision that has proved devastating for many disabled and older citizens. We submitted a complaint to the local government ombudsman, who after investigation concluded the council had been wrong, but had apologised and so would not be taking further action. Denied our public inquiry over technicality regarding the difference between boarding and alighting vehicles as opposed to loading and unloading vehicles, reversed the ban was left with little choice but to wage a war of negative publicity against this administration. If you were embarrassed in front of your national colleagues, Liberal Democrats, as they arrived for conference last Friday to be met by the 80 assembled disabled protesters and our supporters, then you have only yourselves to blame. I should like to offer my thanks to staff in Democratic Services who have facilitated my speaking somewhat regularly and have striven to meet my access needs. I shall remain a critical friend on the other side of this election and look forward to seeing those of you who return under a markedly different seating arrangement. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Flick Williams. That was precisely 2 minutes and 58 seconds. Well done. Your comments have been noted, Flick Williams, and will be taken into account when that report is received. I now move to the speakers attending in person, and I call upon our third speaker, Mr. Jeff Beacon, who would like to speak on the reports of the Executive Leader and Deputy Leader at agenda items 6 and 7 in relation to climate change and the local plan. Mr. Beacon, you have 3 minutes, please. Right, Mr. Beacon has not attended, so we'll move on to our next speaker, who should be Mr. James Else, who would like to speak on the motion on removing barriers to educational achievement at agenda item 3 in relation to SEND provision. Mr. Else, hello. 3 minutes, Mr. Else, please.
The social model of disability puts forth the view that people are disabled by the barriers in society rather than by their impairment or difference. Despite being 40 years old, its key principles of inclusion are still only partially evident in our schooling system. Our teachers do an outstanding job bringing empathy, understanding and knowledge to their roles, but the systems within which they work are often underpinned by an outdated framework of discipline and obedience. I have 2 children who attend schools in York. Over the years, there have been a number of missed opportunities to help them. We were given no support in pursuing an SEN diagnosis, requiring us to seek a private assessment. There is little understanding of the inappropriateness of giving a child with dyslexia the task of writing as a method of discipline, and we had to fight to get our child a laptop, despite this being a primary recommendation of their SEN assessment. There is a lack of awareness of the full impacts of specific learning difficulties on processing, attention, cognitive load, and sensory issues. We need to rethink the foundation of our education systems based on nurture and repair, as echoed by the Association of Educational Psychologists, who see the current system as not fit for purpose. One teacher recently told me, "We know the difference between children with issues and those that are just lazy." No, you do not. No child sets out to be disaffected or troublesome at school. There is always an underlying cause, whether social, psychological, or environmental. Children are one of the most vulnerable groups in society. However, they're also one of the ones with the least rights. Every moment of their lives are timetabled. They're told exactly what to wear and how to behave with little autonomy or consent. I was recently told that my child had no right to go to the loo, even when they're ill, although the school has since revised this position. And there appears to be no opt-out from contact sports like rugby. Secondary schooling in particular sees a negative spiral of learning and emotion, leading to insufficient learning outcomes and a high amount of inert knowledge. There is much more work to be done in meaningfully adopting the UNC's rights of the child to ensure that every child is heard and listened to, with basic rights to body autonomy and reasonable choice. The lack of support for these issues has the most negative impact on children with SEN, but the current system can fail any child. I welcome the proposal to look at a minimum offer within our schools for children with SEN. However, relying on a system that requires an accurate diagnosis of every child with additional needs and requires every teacher to know these needs is doomed to failure. The only way that you can support all children with disabilities and special educational needs is to support all children.
Mr. Earls, I'm going to have to stop you there, I'm afraid.
Got one sentence left.
That's rather more than 3 minutes, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay.
Please,
Can I have my last
if you could vacate the seat, please. Thank you. Our next speaker is Emma Strachan, who would also like to speak on the motion at item 8.3 in relation to SEND issues. Emma Strachan, please, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
I'm a member of a group of parents who believe that their SEN children are being failed by mainstream education in York. My daughter's issues were largely ignored all the way through primary school, despite her difficulties being apparent since reception. The only intervention was her being part of an ELSA group, and due to her sensory issues, being allowed to eat somewhere other than a noisy canteen. She would mask in school and then explode at home like taking a lid off a shaken Coke bottle. It wasn't until she was found to have self-harmed in the playground that the school started to take the situation seriously. Our GP referred us to CAMS and we were told that there was potentially a 3-year wait. I took her to see a private therapist who suggested we were looking at an autism diagnosis. As Lola was in year 6 and already school refusing, the pressure was on for an enhanced transition into secondary school. The transition and the initial few weeks at Millthorpe were wonderful. Lola had great support and felt a level of acceptance and freedom to be herself. For the first time in years, she seemed confident, happy, our home life was harmonious, and she willingly went into school. Then the MAT announced the new contracts for teaching assistants. In a matter of weeks, Lola lost 2 autism key workers and her own classroom support worker. She cried every night as people she liked and had learnt to trust left the building and were replaced with agency staff. Agency staff made no effort to read Lola's passport and frequently made unrealistic demands of an autistic child. One told her to just get on with your work, lady. Another told her to pull herself together. Another spent the whole lesson on his phone. After one of these comments, Lola responded by biting herself all the way up her arms, leaving marks that had gone through her jumper. It takes Lola longer to process information and instructions. Unless she has a TA explaining to her what she needs to do, she will get lost, panic, and then go into fight, flight, or freeze response. She runs from the lesson into a learning support room and spends considerable time on Duolingo rather than spending time in lessons with her peers and getting an all-round education. The remaining TAs have tried their best but are spread too thinly and put under unreasonable pressure themselves. Without proper support in school, we either have school refusal or emotional upset that is having a negative impact on family life and affecting both our mental and emotional health. In the past couple of weeks, I've had to call the crisis team and Sendias, who all tell me that the school need to do more. We've applied for an educational healthcare plan, but I'm unconvinced that they have the staff to provide the support that she needs. Without support, Lola refuses to go into school and I struggle to work. With the correct support, Lola has the same opportunities as her peers. Without, you are setting her up to fail.
Thank you, Emma Strachan. And like the previous speaker, Mr. Elts, your comments will be noted and taken into account when that motion is debated. Our next speaker is Catherine Orplish, who would also like to speak on the motion in relation to SEND issues. Catherine Orplish, you have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. I'm here this evening to speak as a parent of 3 children, 2 with special educational needs or SEN. I want to speak briefly about their experiences in accessing education and why I feel the proposal for the local authority to lead schools in the development of a protocol setting out what they should be available for all SEN pupils is a good one. So firstly, what has worked? Well, briefly, I would highlight 3 things: teachers and the relationships that the children have forged with them, emotional literacy work that has been done in provisions such as the Nest in Scarcroft School, and also alternative provisions such as the Inclusion Centre at Fulford School. But then I can speak much more expansively on what has not worked. So I would highlight here the transition to secondary school. Primaries are under-resourced, provision of SEN is inadequate, but teachers can and very often do make the difference. Moving to secondary, the demands, the rules, the cognitive burden on an 11-year-old child is huge. For many, it is too much, and this is reflected in attendance. And at this stage, punitive measures kick in. Attendance and behavioural policies come into play. This brings me to my next point. What does not work? Well, treating the child as the problem. The child retreats from an environment that feels unsafe and overwhelming, and the parent is counselled to not let them feel too comfortable at home. In essence, to make them feel miserable and anxious everywhere. And that way, they'll attend school. Unsurprisingly, they don't. Imagine if we as adults went to the GP feeling anxious and depressed and were told to return to the environment that actually we found was what caused our anxiety. We wouldn't countenance that. By now, a young person is in a state of crisis, which is a good thing because it's the only way you can access CAMS. However, things aren't quite bad enough. But a carer or a parent calls CAMS almost daily, and at the end of each call, they're provided with a crisis line. But when a crisis really becomes a crisis, but one day it does, and when they call that line, it rings out. There's no answer because there's no funding, and that line isn't really what it says it is. So in summary, the school system often fails SEN students and is in itself a factor in school absence for students with or without a diagnosis. There is provision and there is work in schools which can make a difference, but access is contingent on luck, it's contingent on scarce funding, and it's contingent on having a parent that can advocate for you. So what you hear in playgrounds around the city are parents worrying about where they will send their child for secondary education that might, just might, meet their child's needs. So the development of a protocol could be a solid first step in transparently setting out what SEN children and their parents can expect from schools. In conclusion, I hope that it will facilitate good practice and hopefully, and most importantly, improve SEN pupils' experience of education in our city.
Thank you, Catherine Orplish. Thank you, Catherine Orplish. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account when that motion is debated. Our next speaker, Hughie Ferguson, would like to speak on the motion on Haxby Station at agenda item. Mr. Ferguson not here? No. Let's move on then to the next speaker registered here on my list is Debbie Cobbett. Is she here? Debbie Cobbett, please. Debbie Cobbett would like to speak about matters within the reports of the leader, deputy leader, executive member and scrutiny chair at agenda items 6, 7, 10 and 11. Debbie Cobbett, you've got 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. The leader's report bemoans cuts to local government funding and the possible disenfranchisement because voters will need to show ID at polling stations. All thanks to his own party's former coalition partners, of course. Well, on voter ID, where's the publicity? No posters, no messages on buses or bin lorries, nothing at public libraries. I checked an hour ago before coming here at York Explore. Just this little green box on my on the insert with my council tax bill. So I feel you need to do a lot more to get the word out because it's quite shocking how few people know about this. My further concerns are about toxicity. This word was used in the report about scrutiny. I'm concerned in a wider sense about toxic air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, increasing poverty and inequality in this city. Your reports mention tree planting, flood defences, greening the retail economy, which seems like a contradiction in terms. You know, declaring a climate emergency in 2019 could have opened the way to a greener, fairer York, as could last year's proposals on health, climate and the economy. But you failed to join up those areas, just as you failed to engage with the Citizens' Climate Assembly or to bring citizens and workers into the very secretive York Climate Commission. But we need, as Gutierrez has said from the UN, we need action everywhere, everyone, all at once, to address crises such as the climate and ecological emergencies, as well as poverty. We need change. So I've got my voter ID at the ready. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Debbie Cobbett, for that contribution. And I'm sure your comments will be taken into account when those items are dealt with. Now we have one last public speaker registered to speak, but may not be present or available. And that is Zoe Metcalf, the Police and Crime Commissioner. Do we have? She's not here, not available. Okay. So that concludes the public participation section of this meeting. And we move on to item 5, which is petitions. And therefore I now invite Councillor Doughty, who has 3 of these petitions, and ask Councillor Doughty to present the first of those 3. Councillor Doughty.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The first of the petitions is a request from residents in Strensall and Earswick for serious consideration for an off-road cycle path to link Strensall and Huntington through to through Strensall and Earswick through to Huntington. It's been a project that residents have been asking for a good number of years, obviously with active travel and council's encouragement for less use of the motor car. Then I think it's something that council should seriously consider towards achieving that aim. I have 640 signatures. I spoke last week at Councillor de Gaugne's decision session for transport in relation to the local cycle and walking infrastructure plans. And I was pleased that Strensall will be considered amongst those. So I'm hopeful that this is something in the longer term that can be developed. And I spoke then, and happy to speak when it comes to corporate scrutiny to make the full case for it.
Thank you, Councillor Doughty. Just over a minute there. Can I ask you now to present your second petition, which is regarding the resurfacing of Haxby Moor Road, please? Please.
This petition is just from residents in Strensall, although I'm sure it would have accumulated a lot of signatures, and Haxby had had the time to check there as well. It has 449 signatures. Haxby Moor Road is a major, well, the second route, if you like, from Strensall through to the A1237 via Haxby. It's used by a lot of residents to access amenities and facilities in Haxby, which has far better amenities than Strensall, unfortunately, and it is a well-used road. Sections of it are in appalling state with potholes. The council repeatedly does return to fill them, but invariably within a week or two, they need doing again. There are large sections that need wider scale resurfacing. I appreciate it's probably not realistic to expect the whole road to be resurfaced, but certainly sections should. And just to add briefly, there was one section done about 5 or 6 years ago, one straight section, and that's held up very well. The council dug out the undercore and did that properly. And I think that was an example that we need to use for other sections, rather than repeat the trips.
Thank you, Councillor Doughty. And your third petition regarding, which is from residents of Stockton Forest, regarding the prioritisation of the resurfacing of a number of roads in their area. 1 minute, please, Councillor Doughty.
Yes, again, there are a lot of potholes in Stockton Forest. It's probably one of the worst parts in the city, I think, for cumulative potholes in a small area. Obviously, it's a village, and the number of signatures are less accordingly, because it is only a smaller village. 110 signatures this time. The areas that require focus, Stone Rigs, parts of Sandy Lane, and the cul-de-sacs and Kingsmoor, the cul-de-sacs off Kingsmoor Road, and that includes the pavement and not just the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doughty. Councillor Smalley, you have a petition regarding the adoption of roads and infrastructure on the Granary Estate in Clifton Without. Would you like to tell us about it?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just the one petition. It's 138 signatures calling on City of York Council to adopt the roads and infrastructure on the Granary Redrow Estate in Clifton Without, just off Water Lane, and working with Yorkshire Water, Persimmon and Redrow to resolve all the outstanding issues. We've been helping residents who have been struggling with conveyancing when selling their house, and we need the council to adopt the roads and the estate whilst it's in good condition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smalley, and thanks to both you and Councillor Doughty. In accordance with the council procedure rules, these petitions will be referred to the Customer and Corporate Service Scrutiny Management Committee. We move on now to the report of the Executive Leader, who has his report at page 21 of the council papers. Councillor Aspen has 5 minutes to present his report. Councillor Aspen.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As colleagues will know, this will be my last leader's report to full council, which I know many on the opposition benches would have been incredibly disappointed to hear. But I know I speak for many when I say that as a councillor, full council has never been the most enjoyable occasion. From pre-guillotine times many years ago, trying to do seating plans for the next day at school near to midnight, when some of my colleagues were making the meetings a little longer than some would have liked, to protesters dancing on tables upstairs, to on the night shock resignations, Lord Mayor. There have been a fair few interesting meetings. I doubt I will miss the drama that full council can sometimes bring. When I took on the role as council leader back in 2019, I knew that there was an excellent opportunity to deliver an ambitious and progressive vision for the city. However, like many at the time, I could not have predicted how the COVID pandemic would fundamentally change our way of life. And indeed, it is 3 years to the day since the first national lockdown as we sit here. Leading the city through that crisis, often from my kitchen table, was certainly not something I had envisaged. But we all know that those professional and personal sacrifices were small in comparison to those made by York's healthcare staff and key workers. Sadly, the lifting of the COVID restrictions did not mean our city's challenges stopped there. from the pandemic to severe flooding, the cost of living crisis, and lack of a long-term plan for social care, York continues to be impacted by events beyond our control. The war in Ukraine still rages on. Despite the Chancellor's warm words from the budget last week, it seems to me that the budget was a missed opportunity to address many of those long-term issues and instead serves the more financially well-off with tax cuts to banks and lifting the cap on tax-free pension savings for millionaires. Even in the face of those challenges, I'm proud of the achievements working together and significant milestones we've achieved. Only last month, the historic devolution deal for York and North Yorkshire was agreed, and that has secured a deal which contains 540 million of new money for transport, housing and education for the region. I'm also proud of the progress we've made in delivering York Central, a scheme talked about for much longer than I've been a councillor. Following years of inaction, we now have diggers on site to unlock over 700 million of crucial investment to realise the opportunities of one of the most important brownfield sites in the country. And in welcome news earlier this year, a government minister visited the site in which it was confirmed that up to 2,600 civil service jobs would be located at York Central. I will touch on the disappointing news regarding GBR. Sadly, the government's handling of the process with delays and scaling back of the plans will not help residents or passengers. I'd like to thank everyone who backed the city's bid, residents, businesses, politicians from all sides, and we now await further details on the expected growth of regional rail hubs, of which York is home to Network Rail's Eastern region in the coming weeks. As an administration, we have built hundreds of affordable homes, secured purple flag status, protected and expanded the city's libraries, created a new community woodland, are electrifying our bus network, and we are directly investing over 3 million in local communities. For me, as the local councillor for Fulford and Heslington, this has always been what I've most enjoyed. I've been delighted to work to secure multi-million pounds new flood defences, create new facilities, fix potholes, and support our local community events, particularly Fulford Show return after the pandemic. Many colleagues here will not need reminding that the local elections are just around the corner, and I'd like to thank everyone in advance for supporting the city's democratic process. Of course, I hold significant concerns about the introduction of voter ID, something that I feel will disenfranchise some voters in the city. Lastly, Lord Mayor, before I conclude, I just want to take the opportunity to thank all council staff, city partners, councillors and residents during my time in office, and for councillors and staff for their service to our city. Having been elected in 2003, I've had the privilege to be a local councillor for 2 decades and see the positive impact of local government. The role of a local councillor, let alone a group leader or an executive member or a council leader, is not easy, and that is an understatement. But York is a special place, and this is something I could not have done without the support of colleagues. This includes councillors from all sides. I know that we have not always agreed. That is part and parcel of politics. However, I have appreciated the work where we have been able to come together. I'd particularly like to acknowledge councillors Janet Looker, John Galvin and Dave Taylor for their many years of service to York as they stepped down. As former Lord Mayors, they have served York well, with Councillor Looker, of course, being a former cabinet member, opposition leader and 3 times Lord Mayor. I know several other colleagues are joining us in getting part of their lives back, including my colleagues, Councillors Sue Hunter and James Barker, and I'm sure that Councillor Douglas will acknowledge the service from members of her group who are stepping down. Thank you to you all. I have, however, full trust in my colleagues, particularly Councillor Eyre, which will see a Liberal Democrat majority after May and continue to deliver for our city. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Aspen. Now each leader of the other groups has 5 minutes in which to respond. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Aston. It's nice to have a bit of a joke at the end of a speech, isn't it? The municipal cycle comes to an end and we prepare to reduce the public-facing activity of the council in preparation for all-out elections in York on May the 4th. It's been an interesting 4-year period, and that's likely an understatement. To be given for the first time the honour of election as a ward councillor and leader of the Labour councillors With the global pandemic, the war in Ukraine and the cost of living crisis hitting our communities hard and over a prolonged period of time, our city has responded admirably to the challenges thrown at it. And I'd like to thank York residents, city organisations, businesses, colleagues and council staff for their hard work, drive, compassion and expertise. There is undoubtedly still a long way to go with the Ukraine war and the cost of living crisis, and I fear for how this is impacting our residents. It has been a pleasure to work with many of you across the chamber over the last 4 years, and I hope to see many of you back here again post May the 5th. To those of you leaving us, I wish you well and would like to particularly thank Councillor Looker for her 38 years of sterling public service. Her dedication has been unmatched, and we'll miss her experience, humour and cutting candour. I'm sure you'll watch with some interest to see how the next 4 years unfold. The Leaders' Report outlines many of the initiatives and activities that have taken place over the cycle. Goodness me, have we had disagreements and continue to do so. From approaches to the local plan, York Central housing delivery, inclusive growth, disabled access to the city centre and handling of the exit of the ex-chief executive and resulting public interest report. An effective opposition is vital for democracy, and I'm proud to say that I think we've been an excellent opposition, hard-hitting and prolonged challenge exactly where it's been needed. The new Labour group of 2023 is looking forward to tackling the big issues our city continues to live under. Falling council budgets with increased demand on council services, ever-rising housing costs and lack of availability across the market, congestions on our roads, environmental and biodiversity meltdown, providing a free school meal for primary children across our city, making sure the council street services are responsive to the needs of our neighbourhoods. I could go on. We have a plan for administration, a plan the city has participated in building together with us over many months, a plan to tackle the big thorny issues and drive improvements in living environment, enterprise opportunity, health, well-being, and the affordability of living in our city. Devolution, implementation of the local plan, successful and effective build of York Central, tackling the funding and workforce issues across both adults and children's services within the council, effective interaction with the leadership within the Humber and North Yorkshire Integrated Care Board, keeping our city moving, tackling the barriers to enterprise, innovation and business growth in our city and region. All of these require and demand visible and strong leadership, hard graft and determination. I have that in spades and I can't wait to get on with the job. We all need to work ceaselessly over the next 6 weeks leading to May the 4th to make sure as many York residents as humanly possible are aware of the punitive voter ID requirements implemented by the government, to make sure all York residents have the opportunity to participate in the local elections and select who they want to represent them on this council. A chance to elect members who will do the right thing in the right way for the betterment of our whole city and the people who live here, work and study here, not just those areas represented by colleagues. Councillors who uphold the 7 principles of public life and know when to back out of decision or their elected role when the time is right. The council leader has worked hard over the 20 years he's been a councillor. I don't doubt it. He's standing down from his role as Fulford and Heslington ward councillor and returning to teaching. I wish him well in the next stage of his life, but I will say this to him. Goodness me, has he made his own life difficult and all of ours within the council beyond difficult, simply by not recognising the right time to do the right thing for this great city of ours. I'm thoroughly looking forward to welcoming the new full council members into this chamber in May 2023. I hope, of course, as leader of the council, I'm ready under a Labour administration to take York on to the next stage in its vibrant history. And I wish you all the best for the coming election period. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Councillor Doughty, you wish to speak on the leaders' report, and you have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It might be the council leader's last full council, but I won't be lavishing praise on his failed administration. In 4 years, progress has been excruciatingly slow on practically every city project of significance. We'll never know if York Central, the local plan, or Ring Road dualling would have been quicker without the pandemic. While this was undoubtedly a challenge, the Lib Dems always have a plethora of other excuses rather than admitting they weren't up to the job. It was interesting to see the headline in the latest Lib Dem comic sheet of Green Belt saved. In case they hadn't noticed, the local plan is yet to be agreed by the planning inspectorate. Reminded me of an old adage often used by a wise and experienced teacher who taught me in my years at Millthorpe School: never count your chickens before they hatch. The plan does identify which green belt will not be saved too, of course. Lib Dems like to sideskirt that, recently exemplified at a residents' meeting in Haxby when a call to raise hand was asked for as to whether attendees supported a plan for the building of 800 homes in Greenbelt there. Apparently, Lib Dems kept their arms firmly down, despite their party having jointly selected the site for development in the local plan. That typifies the Lib Dems to a T, both locally and nationally. Nevertheless, I do hope that the draft local plan, which is largely the one with a few tweaks to match the response of the inspector and submitted by the previous administration over 4 years ago, is adopted to finally give protections to our city and outer villages. The leader speaks of the investment going to some of the city's largest infrastructure schemes seen for many decades. He's right, but fails to acknowledge government departments and other organisations, and more importantly, the taxpayer, which pays for it all. Not sure his personal lobbying has been that successful, nor do I believe his party's whinging effect brings much to the table. I am, however, very sorry and hugely disappointed that Derby has been selected over York for the GB Rail HQ. While I congratulate Derby in what must have been a good bid, and it is a historic rail centre too, I'll be interested to learn more about the criteria decisions and reasons for York missing out. Grateful thanks obviously goes to those who made the effort. Hope we learn from this experience for future bids as a city, and also from the better news in government choosing York as a future base for the Cabinet Office and the well-paid employment prospects that will bring. I share the leader's hope that devolution brings the prospect of a stronger economy and greater investment for York. With the inevitable road disruption, while schemes such as York Central and the York Station frontage progress, I do hope that the council ditches unnecessary progression of some plans that seem to have been hushed ahead of the local elections, including those that will see Lehman Road Marble Arch made one way at a time through signalling. This will undoubtedly add to the misery for people that need to get around the city, not to mention put Royal Mail jobs on Lehman Road in jeopardy. The Conservatives pledged to abandon this plan rather than add to traffic mayhem and risk jobs and businesses in York. The council has had plenty of opportunity insisting getting the message out about electoral commission changes, requiring photo ID to vote at polling stations. It was an opportunity missed that they failed to include something when council tax bills went out to homes, in my view, something I raised with officers in advance and would have been an easy and obvious way of helping to spread the message about how people can get photo ID if they don't already have it. I do agree with the council leader in standing by the people of Ukraine against the horrors of Putin's invasion and in helping to ensure that those we host in our city are made to feel safe and welcome. I also look forward to the celebrations with the coronation of our king. I also agree that this city suffers from political instability, and I suspect it's likely there will be further change in May, no doubt contributing the council leader's action in his announcements to stand down at the election. He should have resigned previously after the former chief executive payoff scandal, or even more recently for repeatedly steadfastly refusing to back down over the disgraceful blue badge policy, which repeatedly brings the city into disrepute. As this is the final full council before the elections, I do wish to end on a positive note by wishing all good councillors, and there are some across the political spectrum, the very best of luck, and to all who are not seeking re-election or are not successful in May, a happy and healthy future in the next chapters. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doughty. Councillor Aspern, you have 5 minutes if you wish to respond to the various members, group leaders.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'll respond briefly to Councillor Douglas. We agree on many of those things that you mentioned in terms of the citywide challenges facing us in York and local government. And I too wish colleagues that will be here after May all the best at tackling and taking those forward for York. And it obviously read a little bit like your manifesto pitch rather than asking questions. So there isn't an awful lot to respond to. But reflecting back on Councillor Doughty's points, it was pointed out to me that I'm the longest serving council leader since Steve Galloway. Hello to Steve if he's watching this meeting. But actually it does allude to the fact that being a council leader and an executive member can be tough and is not the easiest job. And I think there are occasions when all of us, and I include my own group in that, could do better at working together and talking to each other on some of those big issues, particularly as we move the city forward on some of those challenges. But I thank you for your thanks for my hard work. And to Councillor Doughty, really pleased to see you talk about those big major projects, from the local plan at the furthest point ever to the funding for the York Outer Ring Road, and to obviously York Central with diggers in the ground. They are schemes that are going to make a huge difference to the city, not just now in the long term, and hopefully that residents across York will reap the rewards from in many years to come. And again, make that request to you to continue to make that pitch to the government for the support and funding that local government needs, particularly in terms of social care and health for the long term, because until we get that fixed nationally, not just here in York, but across local government, we're going to continue to face some big challenges year on year on year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aspen. We now have 10 minutes total for members to question the leader on his report. The leader may respond directly to any question put to him, or he may agree to submit a written answer if unable to respond to the detail. That written answer will be circulated to all council members within 5 working days. Do I have some hands, please? Councillor Waters first, Councillor Kilbane. Was he? Sorry, Councillor Waters. I'll take Councillor Kilbane first. I didn't see him put his hand up first. I'll come to you second. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies to Councillor Waters. Councillor Aston, members of your executive are telling people on the doorstep that the exclusion of blue badge holders from the city centre was not their choice, but was forced upon them by the security services. That directly contradicts the account of former York Superintendent Mark Khan in this email of March 2022, who is unequivocal in saying that while the police advise, it's the council that takes the decision, and indeed is what your executive voted for. So what the question is, have ruling councillors agreed privately to mislead the public on this? And if not, will you commit to disciplining those councillors that utter this untruth? And so far, we've had it reported in Drinkhouses and Woodthorpe and Huntington and New Earswick.
Councillor Aspen.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think on the substantive question that you're asking, we want everyone to safely enjoy our historic and beautiful city. And as you know, strong advice was, if you let me answer what is behind your main question, I can go on to your tittle tattle afterwards. If you'd rather I just answered the tittle tattle and not answered the substantive question, says more about you than it does about the answer that I'm trying to give. I have seen, if you want me to answer your tittle tattle question, I've seen your comments on social media, which I do not think are correct.
Supplementary.
Councillor Kilbane, do you want to ask a supplementary question?
Supplementary.
Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. You're saying that the point that Councillor Kilbane is making is not correct. You are therefore suggesting that my father, who had his door knocked by 2 of your exec members, don't know whether they were aware who he was or not, but who was told categorically by your exec members that they had not taken the decision to remove blue badge holders from the city centre, when they quite clearly have done. That is not tittle tattle. That is a really clear issue of trust in politics. We might all make decisions that we don't agree, that people disagree with us on, but let's be honest about the decisions that we do make.
I'm more than happy if you'd like to ask the relevant executive members later that question, please do. Obviously, you haven't told me who or sent any message to me, so it's impossible to answer that question. As I said to Councillor Kilbane, I do not believe the way you are characterising it is likely to be entirely what happened. And I would be very happy to give you the substantive issue to the really important issues that you raised, but obviously you were heckling me when I was trying to do so. Thank you. No, you were heckling me to stop answering the question, Pete, which doesn't help politics for anyone. Thank you.
One more supplementary on this.
Any more supplementaries from that side? No? Not what, Pete? Okay, Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd just like to ask a question on devolution, but first to say, I welcome the fact that this is the leader's last report to council. I can't offer any praise for what has gone on in the last 4 years. As having brought the role of leader into disrepute, the leader's last report should have been his resignation in May 2021, when the public interest report was brought to full council. I was pleased when the leader announced he was standing down, reminding me, as it does, of an old Yorkshire saying, one day you're top dog, the next day you're just another lamppost. So back to my question. Is the leader content to leave as his legacy to York the handing over of significant powers under his devolution support to an elected mayor, very likely to being the current police, fire, crime commissioner, the very person his colleagues are very critical of in the Lib Dem motion later in this council meeting?
Councillor Aspin.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I thank Councillor Waters for his question. I will try not to take it too personally, because you have said similar things to every council leader that I can remember in my time of office here. However, to answer the key question, I think York and North Yorkshire devolution is a real opportunity for the city, whether that is a councillor or a resident. It's the only way we're going to be getting significant funding and the opportunity to deliver projects that will mean the real difference in terms of the economy and jobs for decades to come. Being honest, in that sense, I couldn't care less who the mayor is in May 2024. Obviously, I want it to be a Liberal Democrat, but what is really important and was reflected by the vote where all councillors but you supported that is to put aside some of our small political concerns with it and grasp the opportunities that it gives for York and North Yorkshire. And I hope you reflect on your position on it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aspin. I think we can now.
Sorry, supplementary.
Supplementary from Councillor Lomas. No.
Well, does Councillor Waters have a supplementary first?
So I beg your pardon, Councillor Waters. Do you have a supplementary?
As you've offered me the chance, the council leader referred to me saying similar things about previous council leaders. Well, this council leader was supposed to be different. I recall in 2014, this council leader making various assurances at opposition group leaders meetings, as you had termed them and called them, rallying against the autocratic rule of Councillor Alexander at the time. You were proposing to bring in the committee system at the council. You were proposing to rein in the influence of senior officers by bringing in the title of town clerk rather than chief executive officers. What happened to that? Because once you got the position of leader, once you got the position of increased allowances and power, that was tossed aside. You might laugh about it, but you know it's true. You know what you said all those years ago, and you know that you ignored it.
Councillor Aspin.
Thank you very much. I'm laughing at the length of the question as opposed to the content in it, Councillor Waters. You'll remember that I wished Councillor Alexander well and thanked him for his public service at the time he stepped down as council leader. And you will remember during that period of time when the last Labour council were in power, they soon lost that power and it became a hung council because they couldn't get along with each other to work for the greater good of the city. And you're right, the opposition groups came together at that time and looked at a variety of things, including how we make decisions, delegations and governance. They are really important questions. And one of the things that everybody signed up to here is to do a review of that moving forward. And it will be for the new council to decide and look at the pros and cons of all of those models that exist. And some of my group have very strong views on that. And I look forward to seeing the direction of travel that it takes, because it's absolutely important that every person who is here as a councillor gets to input in that decision, but equally to look at the pros and cons of any models that you decide to take forward, particularly obviously now that there's going to be a combined authority in the mix. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aspen. The Constitution allows me to invite two more questions on Councillor Waters, supplementary questions on Councillor Waters' question. Are there any takers? Anyone want to avail themselves of that opportunity? No? Okay, let's move on then to the... Is it? Did you have your hand up, Councillor Taylor? Callum Taylor, I beg your pardon. Please, okay, go ahead.
Councillor Lomas, I'm happy to let you go. Fire away.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I know it's difficult to see.
Sorry,
people.
Councillor Lomas, I thought you'd put your hand down. I do apologise.
I kept trying to ask a substantive.
Floor is yours, Councillor Lomas.
It's offering me a supplementary, which I wasn't
Okay,
interested
right.
in.
Carry on.
Because I've got a really important question for Councillor Aston that I received from a resident of my next door ward, Westfield, and it's around the budget item on tackling antisocial behaviour that's referred to in your report. Jean says this has proved a really persistent problem in her area, and she worries that a one-off commitment will fail to tackle the problem in the long term. Can you explain for this Westfield resident why this commitment doesn't last beyond election year?
Councillor Aspen, would you like to respond to that, please?
Thank you very much. Obviously, the motion that's in front of us later addresses a whole variety of wider issues about why this is such an important issue in communities to tackle, like for that resident that you mentioned. That funding, as you say, is one-off and obviously was important to put in the budget, but if future councils are going to need to continue to look at how we can invest in community safety, not just ourselves, but obviously also in partnership with the police and the Commissioner's office, so that we continue to deliver as much as we can for local communities. I'm sure if you wanted to send the particular inquiry through to the ward councillors or myself, we'd be happy to look at it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aspen. That neatly brings us to the full 10 minutes, I'm afraid. So I'd like to move on now. Sorry, those are the rules. I'd like to move on now to the Deputy Leader's report, Councillor de Gorne, and invite Councillor de Gorne to formally move his report at page 29 of the council report.
Formally move, Lord Mayor. I believe I don't get to make 5-minute speeches on this.
Okay, that's very kind of you, Councillor de Gorne. Can I now invite members to question the Deputy Leader on his report? And again, there is a total of 10 minutes. Let's go with Councillor Webb and then Councillor Crawshaw and then Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I acknowledge the Deputy Leader's commitment in principle to sustainable transport and improved air quality over many years. However, translating that commitment into positive outcomes requires more than just a belief that it's the right thing to do. Your administration has presided over a significant decline in cycling rates, squandered sustainable travel opportunities, and set back the traffic reduction course.
Can I have a question?
Yeah, I'm getting there. I'm taking the Mark Waters approach. By years, by making everything appear to be an ideological assault on car users. Given this track record of inability to deliver, why would residents who share a vision of a clearer, lower polluting city with more and safer active travel options back the Green Party in this election?
So that's that. I'm not sure if that was supposed to be a speech in support of my political party. I don't know if you want to just clarify, was that suggesting that
I'm happy to
supporting the Greens?
I'm happy to, Councillor de Gorne. We've been knocking on many doors in the Guildhall ward and in Micklegate ward, And not many people say they want to support the Greens because of all of the inactivity.
Questioning him, please.
Yes, sure. I'll try again. Listen, why would residents who share a vision of a cleaner, lower polluting city with more and safe and active travel options back the Green Party when you have failed repeatedly?
They would back the party because it has the vision and has already made a number of changes that's of great significance in terms of our policies that you can demonstrate by looking at transport strategy, climate change strategy. All of those policies have been implemented, brought forward in the light of, in spite of the COVID pandemic and the challenges for this administration. I'm like you, knocking on doors as well, talking to people, and they are clear that they want to see more action, as you've suggested. That is something that we're committed to, is making good on those promises, implementing those schemes which we have already got detailed either feasibility study or detailed work being done to draw up those active travel programs. We have to secure the funding to actually be able to deliver those, and that is what we're committed to work towards with hopefully cross-party support, which is why as part of our administration we've got a draft local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, which certainly some members from your party, I would hope that all parties will be contributing towards, so that we have a clear strategy which is evidence-based and can deliver on those commitments to promote active travel and make it a positive choice for people rather than one where they have no option but to use the car. That is the reality for many people at the moment, is that they don't have an option of a decent bus service, active travel provision on their doorstep. But we are working towards that.
I'm still waiting for an answer, Councillor.
We will actually deliver that on a cross-party basis.
Are there any supplementary questions on that posed by Councillor Webb?
Councillor Kilbane.
Councillor Kilbane.
I think, to put the question in a nutshell, why have you spent 4 years talking about stuff instead of actually doing stuff? Why have you achieved so little in your 4 years in office, except lots of strategies and conversations and talks?
Yeah, okay, well, I mean, it's from the opposition. I think some people may recall the implementation of certain projects at certain bridge not that far from here, where they moved forward without having the underpinning support in terms of the practicalities. And unfortunately, that administration, the last Labour administration of this city, did a U-turn on sustainable travel. And we have been very careful to try and avoid that situation and making sure that the policies that we have are fit for purpose, underpinned by evidence, and have a detailed plan which will have the support of residents to take forward, not bringing schemes that then they do a U-turn on 18 months later.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Any other
supplementaries on his?
Any more supplementaries on Councillor Webb's question? No. Okay. I think the next one on the list was Councillor One. I'm sorry, Councillor Crawshaw. I missed Councillor One there. I will come back to you. I will come back to you. Councillor One, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Does the Deputy Leader share my concerns over the national cuts to the Active Travel England programme?
That certainly is a serious concern. As you will be aware, the government that we have at the moment put in place quite ambitious, positive policies to promote active travel, walking and cycling. That there was a report called Gear Change, which was accompanied by the LTM 120 policy, which envisaged that the majority, at least 50 by 2030, at least 50% of local trips would be by walking and cycling. Now that what can't happen overnight without the funding to deliver. And we know that in this city, as I've learned to my cost, we put forward proposals which then, when you actually take account of this government guidance of getting decent quality strategic routes in place, they cost more than the officers originally put forward. And in order to actually get those schemes in place, we need to have the funding. And if the government is going to withdraw that funding, certainly we're not going to achieve our targets. And the government is not going to achieve their targets for sustainable travel or the sort of global imperative to tackle climate change. We need to actually provide attractive alternatives for people. And we are still actually awaiting the outcome of the most recent bid, which the government's department invited bids for tranche 4 of the active travel scheme. Depending on the outcome of that, we may be able to put forward a fully costed response to the Riverside path to Jubilee Terrace. As you know, in my decision session this week, we identified some funding and how that can be spent immediately. But in the longer term, we need additional funding to be able to deliver that.
Councillor de Gorn, are there any supplementary questions on that posed by Councillor Wan? No. Oh, is there? I can't see from here because I'm not elevated enough. Who's put the hand up?
Councillor Callum Taylor.
Callum Taylor, sorry, I didn't see you there, Callum Taylor.
No, don't worry about it, Lord Mayor, you're fine. So Councillor Wan's asked about active travel. Councillor de Gorn, in that answer, referred to the Riverside Path investment or lack of. The city's indicative allocation for all active travel schemes in this round of funding is around £360,000. Now, that's for the whole city. But for the Riverside scheme, the council have put in a bid for 1.7 million to plug the funding gap. That's going to get laughed out of town if the indicative allocation for the city is around £1/3 What confidence can you give us that this government is going to give York 1.7 million for one scheme? And what's the plan B for if and when that doesn't happen? Because that scheme needs to happen given your backing of the closure of Lehman Road.
I'm glad that you took the bait on that one. The figure that you quote is correct, but if you read the full detail of the letter from the Department for Transport, it did indicate that councils with well-costed, already worked up proposals were encouraged to bid significantly more money if they felt that was appropriate, and that is certainly what we did. In terms of the costings for the various schemes, we've got a number of schemes that already got detailed design. We don't yet have the funding to deliver those. So your project, alongside other projects in the city, it did well to get to the point where we felt it really important that this should be put forward so that we can try and secure the funding for raising that path, for widening the path, as well as the items which were agreed for the CCT and the lighting at my decision session last week.
Thank you, Councillor de Gorn. I think it's, sorry,
One more supplementary.
is there one more supplementary from that side at all? No? We're on 9 minutes, 40 seconds. Councillor Crawshaw, you've probably got about
20 seconds.
20 seconds.
I'm jumping up and mentioning. Councillor de Gorn, in December 2019, you voted in favour of Labour's motion to remove non-essential vehicles from the city centre. We know that you've gone on to remove essential vehicles from the city centre, but you agreed at that time that you would have a plan in place by 2023 to make this removal of non-essential vehicles a reality. Can you explain what's happened?
Very brief answer, Councillor de Gorn.
COVID, amongst other things.
Okay, thank you. I'm afraid that does finish the members' questions. I'm sorry, Councillor Waters, I didn't include you. I do try to be fair, but there is a time limit of 10 minutes on those questions. I think that brings us to a reasonable point at which we might break for 15 minutes, if you don't mind. And then when we reconvene, we'll go into the motions section. So thank you, members. Let's have a bit of refreshment. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We now move to agenda item 8 to consider the 4 motions on notice submitted under Standing Order B13. These are included in the list of notices of motions and amendments contained in the agenda supplement. And the first motion relates to care leavers' transport costs. And I invite Councillor Baker to move that motion. But before I do, I understand that Councillor Baker wishes to ask Council's consent to alter her motion to incorporate the Labour amendment. So may I ask Council if that is an agreed strategy, please? Okay. Councillor Baker, then please move your altered and amended motion.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I'm pleased and humbled to be presenting this motion tonight on behalf of York Green Party, and most importantly, as a corporate parent, on behalf of all York's care experienced young people. I'm also
Excuse me, microphone.
Myself, having spent 3 years as an independent visitor of children and young people in residential care and worked as an independent travel trainer, I do have first-hand experience of the kinds of challenges these most vulnerable children face throughout their lives. On the national context, the Bernardo's Transport for Freedom campaign calls for care experienced young people to be given parity with elderly and disabled people's free public transport schemes. Bernardo's report explains children growing up in care are 3 times less likely to be in educational training than other young people their age. They are also more prone to feeling cut off, lonely and isolated. Access to transport for these young people is often unaffordable. Single young people are only eligible for the under 25 universal credit rates, and with the cost of a weekly bus ticket, on average nationally and in York being £18, this uses up 1/3 of their weekly benefit. So the City of York Council's current offer for care experienced young people only actually contributes to them moving forward with travelling in a private motor car or motorbike. And those don't offer support for costs related to public transport or the incentives to choose active travel. This disparity is not consistent with our strategies to reduce carbon and promote healthy lifestyles for better physical and mental health. It's important to enable care leavers to choose active travel habits in their day-to-day lives as they move towards adulthood, and as a corporate parent, the council should assist them to do so. Examples from elsewhere: in Cornwall, there's currently a pilot scheme inspired by the views of young people, which gives care experienced young people the benefit of free travel for a year, allowing them easier access to education, employment and social opportunities. Also in Newcastle and Gateshead, they've started a 1-year free bus metro travel pilot since September, which they're hoping they'll be able to extend through the enhanced partnership scheme. So the Green Group firmly believes that this is something York can and should be doing as well. So please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Do I have a seconder to that motion, please? And the seconder speaks for no more than 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry. Who was first? Councillor de Gaulle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who was first?
Seconding.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Beg your pardon.
Okay. So with reference to enhanced partnerships, the provision for young people is a key element of our enhanced partnership. But I'd like to second this motion. Given the many years advising young people at York College on their career plans and helping with transport provision, I particularly welcome this opportunity to second this and accept the Labour amendment as not significantly changing the broad intent of this proposal. It's important the package of support available to care leavers offers a choice of support. While some may really need help with travel costs on public transport, others might be ready for greater flexibility and independence from cycling or using e-scooters, e-bikes, while others will opt for the valuable skill of learning to drive and also taking the opportunity to secure a full driving licence, which could be required for their work in the future. All choices offer greater independence, confidence, and a better chance of securing worthwhile employment, as well as the life skills which will support them in their work and social life. I hope all councillors will recognise this as being the right thing for us to do in support of care leavers, but also the right thing to signal that sustainable transport choices must also be options for everyone.
Thank you, Councillor de Gaulle. I think there was competition there to be seconded, but never mind. Right, I now invite debate on the motion. Each member has 3 minutes. Who would like to? Councillor Webb, and then Councillor Rowley, and then Councillor Councillor Perry. Yeah.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for accepting this amendment to this motion. Council, I personally think this is a friendly amendment that is aimed at improving the wording of the motion, and of course our commitment as corporate parents to the young people in the care of the city. But it did significantly alter the motion and was more friendly to children in care, if I'm honest. As the opposition spokesperson for children and young people, I've had the good fortune to attend the corporate parenting board and thoroughly enjoy the opportunities to speak to the young people and the great advocates we have for those care experienced people here at the council. At a meeting on Monday evening, there was a discussion around what our care experienced young people wanted from the council, and the overwhelming response was that they do not want to be stigmatised and they do want to be listened to. There are, of course, different ways of doing that, but as a corporate parent, the importance is to listen and acknowledge that often the young adults will know what they want and what they need. Of course, that should include supporting public transport and access to active transport options, but it should not be at the expense of other means of getting about. Interestingly, at the meeting of the corporate parenting board on Monday, I did ask if the council could provide access to different forms of transport, and happily officers said that they could already provide push bikes and did so based on individual need. So hopefully that fills in a few gaps in the understanding of the original motion. Council, these children are our children. This is why we have deliberately removed the term in the amendment, move towards independence, and replaced it with develop into adulthood. If we are a family, then we don't just let them fly the nest and never have anything to do with us again. If these young people want a relationship with their corporate family, then we'll be there for as long as they want it. After the May elections, I hope that we have a change of administration. I'm sure you'd expect me to say this, but I hope that the people of York vote Labour to usher in a council that cares. Council that does the hard work, attends meetings, turns up to events, and listens to people and thinks hard about what it can do right for the city and its children. We need a council that takes corporate parenting seriously, doesn't use it as a vehicle to push a particular agenda, but takes a more holistic view to what our young people are asking for. I feel there was a missed opportunity to bring a broader motion on how we can support our children in care. We, of course, amended the motion that was in front of us, but I hope it helps, and I hope and I'm glad that you supported the amendments, and I'm happy to support the main motion now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Our next speaker is Councillor Rowley, please. 3 minutes, Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I want to speak in support of this amended motion. For the last 4 years, I've had the privilege to serve on the Corporate Parenting Board and see the many positive changes that have been made to be more inclusive of the young people in our care. I've had the humbling experience of chatting with those young people in the care system, care leavers, and the dedicated City of York Council staff who tirelessly support them. I've attended care leavers events and have been thrilled to see the City of York Council bring onto our employment some of those who have gone through the care system and are now strong advocates of those in care. As the Council's Armed Forces advocate, I've witnessed and supported care leavers as they've applied for, been accepted and transitioned into the forces where they continue to serve proudly. I absolutely echo Councillor Webb's comments that as elected members, we are all corporate parents. The government's Care Leavers Charter, which incidentally York hasn't signed up to yet, states this: To believe in you, we will value your strengths, gifts and talents and encourage your aspirations. We will hold a belief in your potential and vision for your future, even if you have lost sight of these yourself. We will help you push aside limiting barriers and encourage and support you to pursue your goals in whatever ways we can. We will believe in you, celebrate you, and affirm you. The amended motion reinforces our belief, commitment, and resources for these valuable individuals who should be given every encouragement and support to succeed in life. In the last 4 years, I've sat in this chamber and witnessed many times what could only be described as wrecking ball amendments, designed with political motivation and tit-for-tat flag waving at the fore. With this amendment, which are clear, precise, and measured, they enhance what was already a good motion. This Conservative group will support this amended motion, and I urge members to do the same. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. The next on my list is Councillor Perrott. Councillor Perrott, 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and my thanks also for the acceptance of this amendment. I almost didn't speak tonight, and I've rewritten my speech a few times, so bear with me if I stumble a little bit as I've scribbled parts of it out. While I'm not care experienced, I wanted to share my reasons for strongly supporting this amendment and the language used in it, which better affirms the lived experience of young people who are leaving care. When we were first elected, a training session that we attended quite early on was around corporate parenting. And we were lucky enough to have someone come from the University of York, someone who was themselves care experienced. And he tried to help us understand the challenges faced by these young people whose well-being we're responsible for. He did one exercise with us, asking us to share words, thoughts that first came to mind when he mentioned various family members. And one of these family roles was grandparent, and others in the room shared words like knitting and baking and Sunday roasts. I can remember this very clearly. And I sat in silence because I was unable to admit that the words on the tip of my tongue were domestic abuse. So while I'm not care experienced, I do feel I have different lived experience, and this is why I strongly wanted to support the language that was changed in this motion. I've since then felt guilty because I wasn't brave enough to speak out in that session, but the reason I wanted to share this tonight is because we're really lucky in York. We have a care experienced young people who are far braver than I am, and they do speak out regularly to us. We have our care council, we have Show Me That I Matter, and the young people that are involved, they speak out, they let us know what they want and need from us as their corporate parents. We don't have to make assumptions, they share their priorities and think very deeply about what actions we can take to make the most impact on their ability to live full lives and thrive after leaving care. This motion matters. At the Corporate Parenting Board meeting on Monday, attendees heard that no care experienced young people attended a recent apprenticeship fair held at the Knavesmire because nobody had thought about how they would get there. Other young people's parents and carers took them in the car and went in with them, but nobody had thought about the care leavers and how they would actually manage to access something like this. So before you vote on this amendment, please reflect on how many of us own a car, how many of us have parental support to learn to drive, how many of us supported our own children when they wanted to learn to drive without whipping out a copy of a 10-year council strategy to point out and potentially tut at a young person for making choices that might be quite necessary while public and active travel options aren't always available or reliable enough to depend on. Their lived experience is different to many in this room, as I felt that mine was in that corporate parenting training session way back when. But ask yourself, if you were speaking to your own child, can any of us in this chamber honestly say you'd refer to a 10-year strategy, that you wouldn't instead have a more measured and understanding conversation? That was what our amendment was trying to achieve. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Perrott. I now call upon Councillor Widdowson, and you have 3 minutes, Councillor Widdowson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to welcome this motion and the timely issue it brings to our attention. The Liberal Democrat group will be supporting the motion. As corporate parents to care leavers, it's our job to make sure these young people are ready for what's next. Know that they're supported as they take those first steps into independence, and to help them access the same opportunities as their peers have, without worrying that if they make a mistake, they won't get another chance. We need to give them practical, social, and emotional support that any good parent gives their child, from help to finding the right accommodation, to guiding them through job applications and interviews, to making sure that they know where to turn if they're having trouble. Our responsibilities don't end when a child leaves care, and getting them right is the best way of making sure we set young people on the right path to be settled, successful, and happy adults. I'm proud of the excellent work and representation we provide to care leavers in the city. We've made a real effort to learn from our care leavers to make sure that we can give them the best possible transition into adulthood. It's important that each young person in care can work with us to achieve their ambitions and can do so at their own pace. The Care Leavers Forum, I Still Matter, was consulted and helped design the current local offer, and we'll continue to listen to care leavers' views to make sure the services we provide are what they need. Regarding the specific suggestions in the motion, we do already offer a free bus pass from the ages of 16 to 21 to all care leavers. However, we do agree that more must be done to explore ways we can support our care leavers to use sustainable travel modes. Every child in York deserves a place that they can call home and to enjoy family life wherever possible. As corporate parents to care leavers, that's what we do our best to give them. And as always, there's always more we can do. So we're happy to consider further improvements to our current offer.
Thank you, Councillor Widdowson. And the last speaker on my list is Councillor Kilbane. No? Are there any more to speak on this? Okay. Councillor Baker, do you wish to respond? Do you have 5 minutes, I believe? Do you have 3 minutes in which to do so?
No, I reserve the right to reply. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's go to the vote then on that motion. All those wishing to vote for the motion, please raise your hands now.
That is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. From this rather low vantage point, it's hard to see, but yes, is that unanimous? Thank you. That motion is therefore carried. Thank you, members. Let's move on now to the second motion. And I now invite Councillor Daubney to present the second motion, which relates to community policing. Councillor Daubney, you have 5 minutes in which to present the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm happy to propose the Liberal Democrat Group motion on returning to community policing for the benefit of all our communities. As the motion notes, it is enormously concerning that since 2021, the number of police community support officers has fallen by 20% across North Yorkshire. A total of 190 full-time equivalent PCSOs were employed in North Yorkshire in September 2022. This is in stark contrast to 240 that were employed in 2021. Despite a 4.99% rise in the police precept, amounting to £14.03 extra for the average Band D household, after several years of high percentage increases, the Conservative North Yorkshire Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner has paused PCSO recruitment until March 2024. This drop in numbers really has had an impact on visible policing in our communities, as PCSOs are a tangible sign of neighbourhood policing. Many of my local residents I speak to want to see more visible policing, not less. Unfortunately, we all know that since pandemic lockdowns, antisocial behaviour incidents have been a major concern for our residents. In our local wards, we've been trying to address this through proactive local community action. In Westfield, for example, such action has included re-establishing multi-agency working, supervising diversionary activities for young people, and assisting with those environmental improvements that help people to take pride in their area. This speaks to the importance of devolved ward funds, something I'm glad we were able to protect the Budget Council. More specifically, in early 2022, North Yorkshire Police formed Foxwood Hotspot Partnership, comprising the Safer York Partnership, York Youth Justice Service, Community Services, Housing, the Neighbourhood Police Team, Foxwood Residents Association, and local councillors. I'm aware from my 10 years as a volunteer with the Youth Offending Team, the work that is done with young people and families to turn around behaviours. This work needs to be done consistently and with support from specialists across the team. Collectively, the Hotspot Partnership drove a schedule of actions to reduce instances of crime and antisocial behaviour in the area. For example, improving engagement with local shops, upgrading some commercial CCTV, carrying out target hardening, liaising with the fire service to understand how we can help reduce instances of arson, speeding up the repair and reletting of council properties, and encouraging local people to sign up to North Yorkshire Community Messenger. The police held a weekly high-profile event in Foxford during the summer months to engage residents, which I was pleased to attend. The police data shows a reduction of reported crime in SB over the last year. Local PCSOs who know both the area and local people well have played a key role in the reduction of crime in ASB in Foxford during that time, whether in the partnership or on the streets. But more broadly, whilst the urgent recruitment of PCSOs is vital, we must also look at the issue holistically. We must look at how any improvement plans can be developed, which design out antisocial behaviour in areas and draw together spending and officer time for different parts of the council, together with other partner organisations. The work being done by the Civic York Partnership is continuing to make a difference. There is a case to be made for closer working and embedding PCSOs in the Community Safety Hub. With work underway on the new Community Safety Strategy 2023 to 2026, it's also crucial that Civic York Partnership representatives engage and consult local councils. We know that residents are concerned about crime and antisocial behaviour, so we should continue to take proactive action, and lead the campaign to end antisocial behaviour issues locally. The Government Conservative Commissioner should be empowering PCSOs to do their job, not risking the slashing of their numbers and putting more pressure on those reduced staff who remain. We must return to proper community policing, where officers are visible, trusted, and known personally to local people. I hope the councillors from all parties recognise these concerns and support this motion. By working together, we can make it safer for everyone. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Daubney. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Smalley, do you wish to speak? If so, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I believe that we all support and all agree that police and community support officers serve a vital role in keeping York's communities safe. Officers on the ground work exceptionally hard to protect and serve communities, but they are let down by a lack of leadership from the Commissioner and a decade of underfunding from the government. Now, in the letter, an email sent round to all councillors before us tonight, the Commissioner notes that PCSOs provide a visible presence. Now, this is where we enter the realm of Schrodinger's PCSO, because Schrodinger's PCSO both provides a visible presence when they don't exist because there's been a freeze on recruitment. I believe, having mentioned the Commissioner, it is also the right time to address the role that the Conservative North Yorkshire Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner is playing in this deteriorating issue. On Friday last week, we saw a damning indictment on the Commissioner's leadership. An inspection of North Yorkshire Police Force performance concluded that it required improvement in terms of responding to the public, investigating crime, protecting vulnerable people, and building and developing its workforce. Worryingly, in responding to the findings of that report, the Commissioner failed to take responsibility for the findings. The Commissioner must take responsibility and set out clearly the urgent steps she will take to bolster leadership and management of the service, and importantly, given the freeze in PCSO recruitment that we're discussing tonight, how she is expecting to support that visible and responsive community policing. I'm sure as councillors, we all have examples of residents who come to us who often don't report crimes such as vehicle damage, theft, low-level break-ins, because they know that if they do report it, they know exactly what the answer will be, because nobody will visit them, nobody will take into account their concerns, and nobody will be prosecuted. Given the Commissioner's track record, cutting fire cover in Huntington, freezing PCSO recruitment, receiving 2 damning service inspection reports, it really is quite worrying to think what a combined authority under her Conservative leadership would mean for communities in York and North Yorkshire. Rather than focusing on their mayoral leadership bid and spending time canvassing Tory members, the Commissioner must reflect on their track record of declining police service performance and the role that their Conservative government continues to play in undermining community policing rather than and instead focusing on criminalising protesters and asylum seekers. After decades of Conservative mismanagement and underfunding, the strong arm of the law in North Yorkshire now resembles more of a Mr. Tickle than a well-funded and well-led police service. And with that, Lord Mayor, I urge Council to support the motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smalley. Now, we do have notice of an amendment to the motion from Councillor Fitzpatrick. There is some wording difficulty here, which I'm now going to refer to the monitoring officer to explain. Monitoring officer, would you be kind enough to do so?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. So with deep apologies to council, unfortunately, due to a printing error, a small number of words have been missed from the agenda supplement for the amendment to this motion. So if I can ask members to take up their agenda supplement and turn to page 4. So the missing wording is as follows. In the 4th bullet point down, which begins the 2023-24, after that, there is inserted the word council before the word budget. And then at the end of that paragraph, the full stop is replaced with a comma. And the words a one-off, comma, 1 year gimmick demonstrating no long-term commitment to tackling ASB, full stop. Would members like me to go through that again for clarity?
Just a point of order, Chair, if I may, and to the monitoring officer, shouldn't that change to the sentence be on the bullet point on page 6, the 3rd one down, which is actually the amendments as submitted from Councillor Fitzpatrick?
It's just, it does, but that's just the effect of the amendment on the motion.
Yeah, all I'm doing, Councillor, is reading from the original text so that members can see where the missing words are in the amendment. So the amendment would include the words I have just read out. As I say, would anyone like me to read those again? Very welcome. So that 4th bullet point now will begin the 2023/24 council budget. And then at the end of that paragraph, instead of a full stop, there will be comma, a one-off, comma, 1 year gimmick demonstrating no long-term commitment to tackling ASB, full stop.
Thank you, monitoring officers. Is everyone happy that they've got the correct wording now? And if so, may I invite Councillor Fitzpatrick to move the amendment, please? You have 3 minutes, Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Returning to community policing in the substantive motion is clearly something we would all support. However, the Lib Dem and Green administration can't get away with just blaming national underfunding, and nor will a quick fix of £150,000 just before an election fool anybody. What exactly has the executive member for community safety been doing for the last 4 years? Referring specifically to my own Guildhall ward, where we are both councillors, where was the executive member on the hot summer Friday and Saturday nights during the pandemic when the police, York Bid Rangers and myself supporting residents were trying to disperse hordes of young people wanting to party along the Esplanade and Tower Gardens. Nowhere to be seen. Where was the executive member after race days in the city centre when I was shadowing the police on duty, dealing very well with antisocial behaviour? Nowhere to be seen. Worst of all, when things were about as bad as they could get on a certain street in the Groves 18 months ago, with residents and myself frantically requesting police and City of York support via the exec member. Where was that exec member? Nowhere to be seen. In desperation, I contacted the chief constable who I'd worked with previously directly to ask where exactly policing in the Groves stood, because I didn't know who to contact. Nobody was clear what was going on. Nobody was answering questions. Once the commander for York and Selby got involved, things seemed brighter. At my request, he attended a packed ward meeting where residents were assured that extra resources in terms of policing would be provided. Where are they exactly? And why has the exec member not followed this up and reported back to residents? I even asked to join the Housing and Safer Communities Scrutiny Committee a year ago. At that stage, even after we'd all had our committees allocated, to try and hold the Safer York Partnership to account. Why was I always being told that councillors couldn't be involved in meetings with the police because they were sensitive? Councillors don't need names, just to be involved in a solution-focused way in addressing antisocial behaviour issues. How can we help our residents if we don't know what's going on? We're continually kept at arm's length. Our amendment intends to strengthen the motion by calling for a clear strategy that will be based on effective and accountable multi-agency working, not just talk, and it must include local councillors and residents. It needs to be focused with a determination to move forward from the abject failure we have seen from this administration in dealing with antisocial behaviour within our city in communities over the last 4 years. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Do we have a seconder, please?
Second and reserve the right.
Councillor Crawshaw? Yes.
Reserve the right to speak.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the debate on this amendment then, and I'll remind each member has 3 minutes. So off we go. Who wants to speak, please? Councillor Waller, Councillor Barker. Yeah. Any more? Any more? Councillor Waller, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Fitzpatrick, we could have accepted your amendment as printed in the principles of moving forward as a council. However, the additional set of wording is simply politicking and not in character for yourself, Councillor Fitzpatrick. We could have included in the motion reference to Labour axing the detached youth work service and axing capable guardian, the multi-agency approach to working, but we didn't, because we thought the principles of keeping neighbourhood policing up to full strength was far more important. We will not be supporting this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Waller. Councillor Barker, I beg your pardon. So you don't want to speak? Okay. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I certainly wasn't going to bother, but when Councillor Waller mentioned politicking, I thought I'd better do. We need to remind ourselves of the coalition government in 2010 that savaged police numbers, savaged police funding, and that's why we are where we are now. And I would question all this nonsense that's been talked about. Does anybody actually know any police officers on the ground? Does anybody actually speak to any police officers on the ground? Because most of them will tell you what the problems are. And as far as it goes for recruitment of PCSOs, of course it's been paused. Nobody wants to be a PCSO because the police force or police service, as the trendy term is, are dedicated to recruiting police officers at higher rates of pay. So come on, let's have a bit of reality about this. We talk about antisocial behaviour and reporting it. I was banging on in 2011 about the introduction of the 101 number. We all know why antisocial behaviour cases dropped off a cliff, because the 101 number was as useless then as what it is today. It's all dedicated to keeping crime numbers down. None of this means anything. Yes, by all means, try to get the police fire crime commissioner to a public meeting and let's have the matters debated. But you people, all of you, are after giving that police fire crime commissioner unbelievable extra powers as part of your devolution shambles. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Councillor Kilbane.
I similarly wasn't going to speak on this motion, but I too have been inspired by Councillor Waller's interjection. I just want to make sure that Councillor Waller and all of the Westfield councillors are aware that you will be voting against cross-party working on positive interventions to tackle ASB, additional youth activities and advice sessions. You will be voting against multi-agency responses to ASB, including councillors and residents focused and determined to committing to solving the issue over the long term. Now, what you are voting against are actually things that we have done in Micklegate and proved successful. So you are voting against successful measures that are proven and we know can solve this problem, but you have to keep on doing it. Now, I won't patronise you, Councillor Waller, by ascribing to your character, because to be perfectly frank, given your track record and that of the Westfield councillors on this issue, we expected nothing less.
Thank you, Councillor Kilbane. Councillor Lomas, I think you were next. No, Councillor Crawshaw then, please. 3 minutes, Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In effect, Councillor Waters and Councillor Kilbane have made many of the points that I might have made. I will just be absolutely clear, because Councillor Waller was slightly erroneous in suggesting that these were additional words that the monitoring officer read out. He did explain at the start that there had been a printing error. Those words were part of our original amendment. They were always intended to be part of the original amendment, because it is factually accurate that the money that you put into Westfield this year is a one-off payment. You could have done it at any point in the previous 4 years. And in fact, throughout that 4-year period, you chose to divvy up the ward funding on the basis of per capita, or in some cases per councillor, but never on the basis of need. And in fact, in Westfield, had you have divvied up across the city, the ward budgets on the basis of need, that would have meant an additional approximately £15,000 or £16,000 per year for the residents of Westfield Ward. That's residents who have experienced more than twice the average number of ASB incidents every year across the previous 4 years. So if you want to talk about politicking, I think you maybe need to look a little closer to home.
Thank you, Councillor Crawshaw. And I've got Councillor Dave Taylor speaking next. Yes, please, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I find myself in a strange position of being in agreement with much of what Councillor Waters said tonight. But my real concern is why we're not dealing with the amendments as it's been published. I know the monitoring officer read out very, very slowly on 2 occasions what's the intended amendment was from Councillor Fitzpatrick, but that's not what was published. And I believe that we should be dealing with what was published.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Are there any more speakers? No. Councillor Daubney, do you wish to respond?
No, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Let's take a vote then on the amendment. All those wishing to vote for the amendment, please raise your hands now.
Yeah. 18 in favour of the amendment.
Thank you. All those wishing to vote against the amendment, please raise your hands.
22, Lord Mayor.
22 and abstaining, should I say? No one? Okay.
No, Lord Mayor.
The amendment is therefore lost, I'm afraid. So can we now go back to the substantive motion, and we will have who wishes to speak on the substantive motion, please? Councillor Rowley, Councillor Barker.
Rowley, Barker.
Councillor Crackhill. Councillor Rowley, please, sorry, 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It is very interesting that somebody has introduced the word politicking, which is a crazy thing to do. I just want to address some of the inaccuracies that are in the motion and also bring some clarity to the situation that we currently find ourselves in. It would also be remiss of me not to address Councillor Smalley's slurring attack upon the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner. It would be worthy of me to say to him and to members that in the last 16 months, while he sat on the Fire, Police and Crime Commission board, and more recently in the last couple of weeks, he has never directly contacted or spoken to the Fire, Police and Crime Commissioner about his concerns. Instead, he chooses to politic it in terms of putting it in the paper and calling for a resignation. Anyway, in terms of the inaccuracies in the report, yes, 24% of PCSOs we are down in North Yorkshire and York. That equates effectively to 12 in York, and that's one PCSO for every 16,666 head of population. What isn't mentioned is that warranted officers have increased by 3.4% in North Yorkshire, and again, weirdly enough, the calculation is we now have one warranted PC more for every 16,666 head of population. I would rather have a warranted police officer on the beat than an unwarranted PCSO. Also in the motion, it talks about funding, the net funding from the government of £72 per head of population, and refers to Kent being higher than North Yorkshire. The reality is North Yorkshire has £116 per head of population, which actually is £3 higher than Kent. The temporary suspension on PCSOs has not been ordered by the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner. It's the Chief Constable that has put a stop on PCSO recruitment due to the calibre of recruitments and the calibre of recent candidates for those posts. So a full review of policing and recruitment is being undertaken by the Chief Constable. The Police, Fire Crime Commissioner has always been open to attend meetings with councillors. Indeed, this evening, she registered to speak long before the closing date and time, okay? And she wasn't confirmed to have a place to speak until yesterday morning. And this is a Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner who, as you would expect, has tremendous amount of demands on her time. To have to wait until the day before to be told that you've got a slot is not acceptable when she registered in plenty of time. She's more than happy to come out and talk to councillors. Since her appointment, she has received no requests for the Labour group or the ruling Lib Dem and Green groups. She's received 2 requests from the Conservative group and local association, and she's attended both. She's offered to come and attend this council and address councillors either individually or as a group. So writing to ask her to do that seems pointless. Antisocial behaviour is a serious issue, thank you, Lord Mayor, that requires the correct response from our police.
Councillor Rowley, I know you're in full flow and very passionate about it, but
this is my last chance.
You've had more than 3 minutes, I'm afraid. I'm going to stop you there. I'm sorry.
Due to the inaccuracies in this
Councillor
motion,
Rowley,
Conservative
please.
will be abstaining.
Councillor Rowley.
We've met with her 3 times, Martin. We've met
Right.
with her
Let's move on to our next speaker, Councillor
3 times.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Rowley. We often hear from residents their concerns about crime and safety in their local area. The answer to the concerns of those communities is quite simple. It's to improve community policing with more resources, not less, more officers, not less, with more joined up working, not less, and with more responsibility and accountability, not less. Despite the Conservative government's empty political slogans of supporting community safety, the investment or lack thereof speaks much louder than the words. We have heard several times today about the decline in PCSO numbers locally. The same trend is being seen up and down the country, with the number of active PCSOs falling by an average of 33% in England and Wales since 2015. Nationally, England and Wales have lost just over 4,000 PCSOs since 2015. Despite the concerning trend of declining visibility and numbers of police officers in the region, the costs of the Conservative Police Fire and Crime Commissioner of this office continues to increase. Simply put, more money should be invested in our frontline services than spent on the Tory bureaucracy. The current Police and Fire Crime Commissioner is freezing recruitment of PCSOs and expecting efficiency savings from our emergency workers, whilst our own office costs go up. In the last 2 years alone, these services have been under pressure to slash £10 million from the budget and make staff redundant, whilst the north-south divide and an inequality in the way central government funding is allocated and continues to plague the system. It'll be no secret to our party's view when it comes to the necessity of the post. I know I've stood for it on both occasions. The cost of holding elections, as well as the money associated with paying a commissioner, their office, support staff, their expenses would be better spent on the front line. This role, in a sense, thank you. Tom Thomas has had the clap. The role, in a sense, ceases to exist under the new combined authority, and we know much of the bureaucracy will still remain. There is much that needs to be done to address community policing nationally, including legislative changes to tackle inequalities in criminal justice, investment in youth services and mental health, and the introduction of the comprehensive strategy to tackle the causes of crime. However, we can and must do more in York and North Yorkshire. I believe that this motion, the Lib Dems motion, sets out some of this work and messages which urgently need to be addressed to the support of our communities. And I would urge all members to support this motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Councillor Craghill, I think you're next, please. 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Green Group is very happy to support this motion, and we would have been very happy to support the amendment as it was originally put before us, but we weren't happy to support the unnecessary comments about lack of commitment to tackling antisocial behaviour. Clearly.
Point of order, Lord Mayor. This is the second time that we've heard a repetition of a wholly inaccurate statement that our amendment had been changed since we originally properly submitted it. You can't allow that to carry on.
Councillor Evans, I'm not making a point about that procedural matter. I'm merely referring to
Can we just calm down a bit, please? I don't think the motion has been altered, has it?
Right.
No.
Nobody said it anyway.
Okay, let me rephrase then. I'm very supportive of your comments about multi-agency working, but I do not accept that the comments you made about lack of commitment to antisocial behaviour. And given this is my 3 minutes, I simply wanted to then add that obviously there is a great deal of investment from the council in tackling antisocial behaviour, which is part of the ongoing revenue budget, which this administration has protected through the antisocial behaviour hub, through neighbourhood enforcement officers, through antisocial behaviour officers, and through the police officers who are also based in the hub. So I just wanted to make that particular point. I think more generally in terms of the motion, there are 3 issues that spring out to me from this. The one is the obvious issue about the need to sustain numbers of PCSOs at a level that means they can not only be seen on the streets in our neighbourhoods, but are also actually able to develop consistent relationships with these communities. And really that applies whether they're PCSOs or PCs or whatever they are. People want to see police officers on the streets. And so we very much support that part of the motion. The second issue is the need for more sustained multi-agency working, as I said, which we do support. It already happens, but we need to go further, not just dealing with hotspots, but also taking that further on a day-to-day basis, with collaboration and better communication becoming part of day-to-day practice between agencies. Again, as the amendment mentions, some of the key ways of tackling antisocial behaviour in an area are not just about enforcement, but are also about things like increasing the provision of youth services and maximising access to mental health and other support services, which is why we did indeed include extra available funding in the February budget for those areas, in addition to what already exists. It's also why it's so important to have all the right people around the table, which leads to the third issue, the development of the new community safety strategy. I entirely agree that this should include ward councillors as key contributors, as well as consulting residents. I think we also need to consider the role in the partnership of a wider group of agencies, including health and mental health services, youth and community services, and social care, which is why it was good to see most of those agencies around the table and actively participating in the most recent Safer York Partnership development session. Like any partnership, the Safer York Partnership is only as good as the joint working between the organisations that are its members. It isn't an organisation in its own right with separate staff, which seems to be a common misunderstanding. Current partnership priorities include the city centre, counter-terrorism, domestic abuse, high-risk ASB and serious organised crime. I believe it does make sense to look at a priority in the new strategy to maximise multi-agency working, and I'm winding up on crime and ASB in communities around the city. And I'm hopeful that the partners can find ways of resourcing, coordinating.
Councillor Crackhill, that's a very generous 3 minutes, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Councillor Lomas, you were next to speak, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I thank Councillor Craighill for amending her incorrect statement about the amendment that we properly submitted in full originally. There are some very warm words in this motion, things that we can all get on board with, I would hope. But of course, words are easy and it's actions that count. Of course, something is better than nothing. So despite you not accepting our amendment, we will be supporting this motion because we agree that the lack of PCSOs is a real problem, as is indeed the lack of police officers. And while we support the notion of more collaboration across different agencies, I really do want to stress that we can say all the warm words we like, and I'm sure you will, but these projects take a lot of work to deliver. In Guildhall, in Heworth, in Hull Road, in Holgate, in Acomb and in Clifton, Labour councillors are not just saying the right things, they are doing the right things. And I am sure that the contents of this motion will be coming to a yellow leaflet near you very soon. In fact, I can almost hear the Liberal Democrat group's twitterings as I speak, but you've had the opportunities, you've had 4 years in power to address some of these issues, and your actions or lack thereof speak volumes.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas, and I think our last speaker is Councillor Smalley. 3 minutes, Councillor Smalley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll be quick. It's just really to ask for Councillor Rowley's help. I sent an email to the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner on the 14th of March. It was marked important, and the headline was of the email, the subject was Urgent NYP York Barbican. And it was a matter relating to an ongoing police operation and some vulnerable individuals. On the 15th of March, I had a holding response from their office. I've not had any email back. So perhaps in many of your meetings that you have with the Commissioner, you wouldn't mind escalating this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smalley. Now, Councillor Daubney, do you wish to respond at all to the various members' contributions?
No, Lord Mayor, thank you.
Okay, let's move to the vote then. Can we have a show of hands, please, for those in favour of the motion?
That's 41 in favour, Chair.
That's 41 in favour. Those against, please. Any abstentions? Three. Very well. The motion is therefore carried. Thank you very much, members. Our third motion is removing barriers to an education and educational attainment, and I would invite Councillor Looker to move that motion, please. Councillor Looker, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In the end is my beginning. And I say that because I recall with great pleasure my very first major speech at North Yorkshire County Council, which was to propose a motion demanding an urgent look and review of the way in which we provided early years education and support to children in the county. And of course, that included York at the time, because we were part of North Yorkshire County Council as far as education and children were concerned. I'm happy to say that motion got through, and it was the beginning of a very profitable and interesting expansion of early years provision in the county, which was challenging. And so it is good to conclude my political career with another motion reflecting education. And I wish in some ways this had been a more, in a sense, perhaps more positive, more exciting reflection of opportunity that my very first motion had. But it is almost equally and sadly, devastatingly important. For anybody to learn, children, adults, all of us, and we all learn every day of our lives right up to now. To learn, you have to have certain qualities within your brain. It has to be comfortable. And that means it has to be comfortable with the physical surroundings it is in. So an uncomfortable chair, for example, can get terribly in the way of you concentrating and focusing. But infinitely more important is the fact that so many of our children have their lives desperately impacted by poverty, austerity, and the consequences we are seeing of the cost of living crisis. How can you learn if you are permanently hungry? How can you learn if you are cold at home, if you are frightened for what is going to happen, if your family circumstances are bad and difficult? How can you turn up at school, put all that outside and learn? And you can't. And if we're going to do our very best for our children across the whole city, then we have to do better at dealing with some of those anxieties, quite legitimate anxieties and worries that children bring with them to school. They do not come into school as a clean slate. They come into school with the whole package of their life and their community and their families behind them. So how can we do this? I mean, if I was in government, as I have frequently said, I would have sorted this out quite a long time ago. But sadly, I am not in government and do not see the likelihood of ever getting there. So you'll have to do without me there. But this motion is proposing at least some solution to one of the very fundamental issues that is going wrong with children at the moment, which is feeling hungry. It seems to me that it is a common requirement that every civilized nation should provide for all its children everywhere, all the time. They should not be hungry. They don't deserve to be hungry. And quite frankly, we must do all we can to prevent it. Now, we can't turn up at every home and cook every child a nice, decent meal last thing at night. But what we can do is work within schools to say, we will give every child a hot meal at lunchtime. And this is where this motion is making a start. We will provide initially, looking at primary level, we will provide all primary children with a hot meal. And I think we have to be a universal benefit on this one, because you cannot anticipate what child is suffering and what child is going through those extremely difficult circumstances. The free school meals category is woefully flawed. It eliminates lots of children who should be, and if you look at their family circumstances, ought to be entitled to a free school meal. But because of the various intricacies of the welfare benefit system, they don't get it. So this says we will give it to all children. And that means that there will be no stigma. There will be no picking out. There will be no labeling with a little badge. I have to have a free school meal. It will be all of them. And that is right. We cannot.
That's a good 5 minutes, Councillor Looker, I'm afraid.
Honestly, I have to tell you, Lord Mayor.
If you could draw to a close, please.
In the end is my beginning, because I was always being taken up for talking for far too long, right back in North Yorkshire, and I'm carrying on. You'll have to bear with me. We are a village.
Councillor Looker.
This is my last.
We're nearly at 6 minutes. Councillor Looker, please.
This is my last sentence, Lord Mayor. We are a community. We are responsible in partnership.
Councillor Looker.
In partnership, we can fulfill this promise. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. That was a very passionate speech, Councillor Looker, and thank you, but we have to try and keep to time. Do we have a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to begin by paying tribute to Councillor Looker for all of the work that she has put in over the years here in York. I know she's taught us all a lot over time, and York is a better place for having her. Thanks, Janet. Thanks for everything.
Yeah.
Council, almost a quarter of children in York live in poverty. The cost of living crisis, the cost of a Tory government in Westminster is leading to our children going hungry. This motion is about getting us all in this council to recognise the benefit of every primary school child having access to at least one hot meal every school day. And when you talk about the development to help those children, I mean their physical health and well-being as well as their academic achievements. Because one will not come without the other. Obesity, dentistry problems, eating disorders and poor mental health are all exacerbated by poor diet and a lack of access to healthy food. And what begins in primary school continues in secondary school. And sadly, in a lot of cases, it is difficult to rescue situations. Not impossible. And with the careful work of our staff in schools and well-being teams and catering teams and health teams, problems can be arrested. But all of this takes time and money that could have been spent on enriching a child's life, not just fighting the battle with poverty alongside them. Council, following the COVID pandemic, there has been a decline in school attendance everywhere. And I firmly believe that this is linked to poverty. If you're not confident about how your body looks, if you're suffering from toothache, if you're depressed because your mum and dad are going without for you and you know that, or you're being told through social media to be glamorous, and quite frankly, that's not how the real world works, you are more likely to decide, maybe I won't go into school today. Labour believes that one great thing that York could do to help our schools is to start to provide our young people with a hot meal each school day. Council, we know that there is good practice in this city that needs sharing. This will include poverty proofing in schools. This will include breakfast clubs. This will include the excellent work that those members of staff working with young people with special educational needs provide. And you heard from the excellent public speakers earlier tonight about how important that provision is. But we would not be doing our job if we didn't act as a council as the glue that holds all these different parts together and make sure that that best practice is served and make sure that our residents are best serviced. Finally, wouldn't it be easier if the government got behind our kids as well? We can't wait for them, so let's do it ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. I now invite debate on this motion. Each member has 3 minutes. As Councillor Crawshaw, would you like to go first? Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I'd like to thank Aoife Kilfeather as well for speaking to us earlier. I can't imagine being that brave when I was 10 years old. Likewise, to the parents who spoke, I know what courage it takes to stand up and fight for your child's rights. You get called a vocal minority, you get put down, but actually they are just a small representative group of the many, many others who've experienced difficulties pre-pandemic, certainly, but I think it's gone into overdrive post-COVID. In fact, I would go as far as to say that of the families that I know with school-aged children, it's those who haven't experienced at least some form of post-lockdown challenges that are the exception. And with the best will in the world, schools are simply not equipped to deal with the scale of what they are being asked to take on. Nor is CAMS, nor is the local authority. So where we do make interventions, it's vital that these are thoughtful, nuanced, and their impact is understood. And sadly, that is not always the case. The pressure on schools to act, particularly around attendance, has frequently, it seems, led to an increase in pressure on young people with a counterproductive impact for some. Likewise, the local authorities' interventions have possibly not always been as helpful as they were intended to be. A leaflet that was recently sent out by this council to all parents in the city focused on the education that your child is missing out on when they're not in school, the damage that could be caused to their life chances. This just adds pressure to already under pressure families, with options for support only coming on page 4 of that leaflet, right at the end. It carried a prominent, erroneous message that letting an anxious child stay off school, quotes, does not help things to get better, as if it's an active choice for those families. And actually, sending a traumatized child into a traumatizing environment day after day, surprisingly enough, that does not help. As any clinical psychologist will tell you, it could actually be compounding the situation, pushing children to crisis point when a little bit of flexibility could perhaps have helped them over a dip. Worse, though, was the utterly damning line. Again, quotes, "We know that children who go to school every day are more successful." Really? Is that what we really want to be saying to the parents and children of this city? Are children less successful if they can't attend school? Or will they not now be successful because they've missed some education? They may not attain quite as high grades as they could have done, but actually there's lots of factors that impact on that. But less successful. What are we saying about how we measure our children? I know that money is tight and we're all under pressure. And I know too that for most children, most of the time, school is absolutely the best place for them to be. But our role as a local authority should be to lead by example. We need to protect our schools, protect our families, and protect our pupils. In education, one size does not fit all, but a citywide insistence on listening, asking,
Councillor Crawshaw, I must ask you to draw to a close, please.
One sentence, please, if I may. Just responding to those attendance difficulties with kindness, compassion, and flexibility at all times and at all levels. That might just be the one size that should fit all.
Thank you very much. As a parent myself and as a grandparent, I know the views are very passionately held and sincerely held, but we must try and keep to time if we can. The next on my list is Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I'd like to thank Councillor Looker for bringing this important matter to full council, and I would personally like to thank her for her long service to the council. We're one of two connections with the previous York City Council. The rise in pupils eligible for free school meals is of concern, and we appreciate just how much the pandemic and the cost of living crisis has impacted on those already vulnerable in the city. I'm proud that as a council, we stepped in to support the provision of free school meals since the start of the pandemic. In total, nearly £600,000 has gone directly towards this, with nearly half of this funding coming from the council's WIFOS fund. Further support through the latest household support fund allocations have been targeted to the families most in need. I do believe that we all here recognise that child poverty is an important issue, and it needs more than the resources that a single council can provide, but we must continue to do as much as we can with the funds that we do have. And that's why we've focused so intensively on targeting limited funds and addressing educational attainment gap throughout the city. The issue of extending free school meal eligibility to those families, particularly on the universal credit, who just missed out, and the need for lack of automatic enrolment is an issue that I think most of us can agree with, and we do agree the government could be doing more. Regarding the issue of attendance, it is the case that the rise in primary school attendance is improving. However, in secondary school, attendance level is a concern, and something that council teams are working with schools and education providers in the city, looking specifically at special education need pupil support. And I think that the team who are working with schools are trying their best to provide solutions which are tailored to the pupil, to make sure that they are there in school, but where there is additional support needed to make that bridge, that it is being done. In terms of access to free school uniforms, most schools do have their own swap shops, and the council is doing what it can to support those and to promote those. Finally, regarding the resolution on developing a York protocol, which describes what should ordinarily be available for pupils with SEN, I'm happy to say that work on this is already well underway, based on best practice from Portsmouth, and was discussed at the last meeting of the York Schools and Academies Board. Officers intend to publish protocol for the start of the new academic year in September. Therefore, I'm happy to support the motion and work across the political divides on this important issue that I believe we all wholeheartedly agree upon. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Waller. Our next speaker, I think, is Councillor Orrell. Councillor Orrell.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to address the issue of the free school meal provision. Over and over again, this government has ignored the pleas of councils, charities and families to extend the provision and eligibility of free school meals. We'll all remember during the pandemic how our council stepped in where the government had failed to fund the provision of free school meals throughout holidays. And now we continue to target support to the most vulnerable. However, it should not be down to individual councils to deal with government failures. We've continued to lobby the government to make the case to provide additional funding for free school meals so that neither schools nor councils have to come up with the funds from their already overstretched budgets. We know that our schools in York are one of the lowest funded in the country. This motion fails to specify whether the Labour group is also proposing to provide free school meals to all primary pupils during holidays. However, either way, we will all appreciate the considerable amount of funds this would require. So whilst we will, of course, continue to work with city partners to support the most vulnerable in the city, we have to be realistic over the amount of funds the council can commit itself. Liberal Democrats, who first introduced free school meals for all 5 to 7-year-olds, despite Conservative Party resistance at the time, have continued to call for expansion of eligibility and automatic enrolment. An estimated 800,000 children are not entitled to free school meals because of their household income, is just above the ridiculously low £7,400 annual income threshold. This is made worse because the thresholds have been frozen for the past 4 years. The LGA have found that almost 250,000 children are missing out on free school meals due to the lack of an automated sign-up system. The process for parents and guardians to sign up their children for free school meals should be streamlined to capture those who already meet the criteria. Automatic enrolment could benefit the estimated 11% of eligible school children who have not yet taken up the offer. It's clear that the pandemic and the cost of living crisis has further highlighted the hardship faced by many York families. Whilst we continue to do all we can to support our residents, and work with partners to deliver community food aid, there is a need for the government to step up. This can only be tackled through a comprehensive strategy, long-term sufficient funding for councils to deliver financial assistance schemes for our communities.
Thank you, Councillor Orrell.
Having said that, I do believe we all share the concerns over this issue, so let's work together on it, Lord.
Thank you, Councillor Orrell. Thank you. The next speaker on my list is Councillor Kilbane.
So it wouldn't be a full council meeting if you didn't leave your mic on for a bit. We welcome the Lib Dems change of heart on this matter and your support for this motion. I just want to briefly talk about the SEM provision part of the motion before you. I want to thank the public speakers who we listened to earlier. It takes an awful lot of courage to come up and talk about things that are so personal to them in front of a room full of strangers with funny swords and maces and, you know, all that kind of palaver going on. So thank you very much to them, especially to Aoife, who did herself proud and showed us all that, you know, these problems can, with the right support and the right attitudes, be overcome. In the Micklegate ward, I'm currently supporting and working with a group of 15 parents whose children are extremely anxious about going to school, whose children are sometimes refusing school, sometimes for long periods of time, whose children are self-harming. And this has a traumatic effect both for the child and on the family, with knock-on consequences of inability to work, etc. And what struck me as I'm working with this group is that most of them are saying that actually this time last year, everything was good. Their children were attending school, their children were getting on, and by and large, their children were happy. And what changed was that South Bank MAT unilaterally altered the terms and conditions of the teaching assistants and support staff, and that led to droves of those staff leaving both the primary and the secondary schools that are in our area. This hostile environment that was created for the teaching assistants also seems to have spread into some of the cultures of the schools, with unnecessarily harsh discipline, boarding up windows in the school so that children aren't distracted. And of course, this has the biggest impact on those children who were already anxious, those children who already struggle to go to school, and those children with special educational needs. And so what's actually happened is the most vulnerable children and families in our ward have been the most adversely impacted. Now, this group of very brave and very admirable parents and carers have set up a support group to try and find a way through this problem, because everybody wants their kids to be happy and to have their kids back in school. And as part of that process, they have written a letter to South Bank MAT, which has been signed by over 200 of the parents and carers of the children who are within their particular schools. They've struggled really to get an adequate response to that letter. And I discovered today, while talking to a very experienced teaching assistant who had applied for a job.
Thank you, Councillor Kilbane. I must draw you to a close there, I'm afraid, but thank you for your contribution. Thanks very much indeed. I want to try and get as many views in as possible. The last one on my list here is Councillor Crackhill. Councillor Crackhill, 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Green Group will, of course, be supporting this motion. Most of my comments are focused on the free school meals part of the motion, but I do want to add support also for the other parts and the SEN protocol proposals. I certainly felt that speakers at the beginning were very moving, and I'm very much in agreement with so many of the points that they and others have made about the school system and what good should really look like. Going back to the free school meals, The provision of free school meals as a universal right for every primary school child is a great policy, supporting health, the ability to access education and removing stigma. It's also a difficult one to implement with this government in place, but that shouldn't stop us campaigning for it. It's definitely a very effective way of using public funds if they could be made available, which a government could choose to do by reviewing its priorities. To bring together this funding at the local level in the current circumstances is ambitious, but again, that isn't a reason why we shouldn't try. It's quite clear that council budgets cannot support this level of funding without taking funds away from other crucial purposes. And I think a cross-party scrutiny committee agreed with that previously. And as other people have said, this will involve many millions of pounds a year to achieve. Now, I say that really because I think it's important to be aware of the size of the challenge that you're talking about here in this motion. It's not just going to happen because we all say it's a good idea. Having said that, though, we agree that this isn't a reason to not try. As I said, there's that saying that it takes a village to bring up a child. And there's no reason why a city like York, which often operates like a village, shouldn't be asked to step up to this challenge, particularly given that reducing the impacts of poverty and financial inequality should ultimately help everyone, as our very own Wilson and Pickett have shown us through their work. If this motion is passed, the Green Group will certainly be happy to work with any other parties in future to help deliver on this, if at all possible. And finally, I would just like to add, I welcome the fact this motion has been proposed by Councillor Looker in her final council meeting. As a fellow ward councillor, I would like to acknowledge the many years she has served on the council. We have tended to agree on a lot of ward matters, and I'm aware her stepping down marks quite a big change for the ward and for the council. And I'd just like to wish her well in future.
Thank you, Councillor Craghill. And on that note, would Councillor Looker like to respond, please?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. It's delightful to have received so much support. I do want to draw council's attention to the first bullet point of council resolves. We commit the council to a policy with working with external organisations to provide free school meals to all primary school pupils. We recognise, absolutely recognise, that the council's individual funding is very limited, and therefore this is something we cannot go it alone. If we try to go it alone, we'll be looking at this 20 years down the line or whatever. But I think this motion is trying to say, let's do something realistic. And to pick up my own and Councillor Craghill's comments, it does take a village, it does take a community to raise a child. You can't do it just in the privacy of your own home, and you can't do it just within the confines of the council. Let's support this motion and let us go forward, working as closely as we possibly can with all sorts of different partners who can help make it work, because our children deserve no less. And thank you very much. I shall not stop making rude or acerbic comments when the opportunity arises.
Thank you, Councillor Looker. Can we now move to the vote on this motion, please? Can those who are in favour of the motion please show?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. That is unanimous, and the motion is therefore carried. We now go to our final motion of the evening, which is the Haxby Station project. Before I invite Councillor Pearson to move this motion, I understand that he wishes to seek Council's consent under Rule B18 to alter it. Is that correct?
That's correct, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Pearson?
That's correct, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
In accordance with, as set out on pages 11 and 12 of the agenda supplement, is that correct?
Yeah. That is correct, Lord Mayor. Sorry, microphone issue.
Okay. So we've also received an amendment to the motion from Councillor Douglas. I understand that should council grant consent to alter the motion, Councillor Douglas will seek consent to alter that amendment in accordance with the altered wording set out on pages 12 to 14 of the agenda supplement. Is that correct, Councillor Douglas?
Yes, it is, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. So in order to simplify matters that we can move on to our discussion as quickly as possible, I will now ask council to confirm its consent to both of those alterations. Does the council so consent? Yes. Thank you. So, Councillor Pearson, please move the motion as altered, and you have 5 minutes in which to do so. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Lord Mayor, and good evening, council. I'm delighted to propose our motion tonight, asking council to fully commit to the Haxby Station project, and which recognises the progress made to date. Bringing back a station to Haxby is an ambition that has been held by residents in the north of York for decades. I'm proud to be able to say we are now at the cusp of turning this ambition into a reality. Some of you might be aware that I'm a rail enthusiast. I realise it's not obvious and it may even come as a shock to some, but I've been after a station at Haxby since I was a lad. May I present, and I've got my glamorous assistant Christian here, Exhibit A, my granddad's 1922 copy of the Bradshaw's timetable, which will inform you that there were 10 services a day from Haxby back over 100 years ago. I'd love that today. I want to say thank you to my late granddad for passing on my love of transport trains and, of course, the much underappreciated timetable. When everyone thinks about railways, maybe they think of the famous locomotives that fill the Railway Museum, or of Brunel's bridges, or of the Channel Tunnel. But for me, the real beauty of the railway is in the timetable and the services and the opportunity that they provide. And of course, core to a timetable is stations. And that's what Haxby Station will bring to our community, opportunity and services. May I then present Exhibit B, a 9th edition of Stuart Baker's Rail Atlas of Great Britain and Ireland. Hours of fun for a rail enthusiast and anyone who enjoys a good map. This map shows how even back in 2001, Haxby and indeed Strensall were proposed as stations and gives a tantalising glimpse of the connections and connectivity the stations could offer. A new station would provide direct access to the rail network for thousands of residents from Haxby, Wigginton and surrounding communities. It would provide faster, more efficient and sustainable transport, reducing congestion, particularly on the Northern Ring Road. It will offer a more joined up transport service for local residents with direct connection to York, Leeds, Manchester and beyond. Haxby Station will mean improved access to the rail network with all the new business, employment, health, well-being and leisure opportunities that entails. Stuart Baker, the author of that map, was a Haxby resident and a DfT Supremo who we sadly lost during the pandemic. I owe him a great deal of thanks for explaining to me over 10 years ago how we might turn Haxby Station from an ambition to a reality, including all the technicalities and problems that needed solving. I now ask Christian to present Exhibit C, now 10 years old and slightly embarrassing on rereading, my university dissertation entitled Reopening Haxby Station. Although after 10 years in the rail industry and after a few years as a local councillor and a campaigner in Haxby and Wigginton, I do now have some criticisms of my third-year university work. I do still agree with the conclusions, if I may quote, a station at Haxby will be well received and well utilised. While there are a number of concerns regarding traffic and transport at the new station, with careful planning, infrastructure improvements and appropriate promotion and advice, many of these effects can be mitigated. My career has been devoted to transport and the railway. I've been delighted to work on a number of projects which have improved timetables and services for passengers. And most recently, I've been proud that my beloved LNER is leading the post-COVID railway recovery, now routinely carrying more passengers than before the pandemic. I present my last and final Exhibit D, which I promise I haven't stolen, an Azuma station stop board, which tells the drivers exactly where to stop the train at the end of the platform.
All aboard!
As a railway industry professional involved with commercial timetable development, i.e. putting bums on seats of trains, I am certain and I am confident this station will be a success wherever it is located in Haxby. Council, this motion notes just how far we have come to realising this ambition. We have the land, we have the funds, we have the council's match funding, we have design work and business cases, we have a timeline. The DfT and Network Rail and operators support it, and we are at the cusp of submitting a planning application. It has never been so close. We would not have got to this point if it not for the initial investment secured by the Lib Dems back in 2020, which began the work in earnest with a business case and was recognised by the DfT and awarded further funding. Since then, significant work has taken place, and I'd like to thank the officers who are leading this work, Richard, James, Tony, Dave, Graham, and all the work being done by Network Rail as well. Today is the chance for us to set straight some of the misconceptions which continue to surround the chosen site for the station. A thorough evaluation from council officers and Network Rail explored 5 sites: Strensall, Towthorpe Road, Station Road, the Ring Road and New Iswick. Simply put, the station can only go where the railway line is. They were the only feasible locations that we looked at. The evaluation was clear that the Towthorpe Road site was the only realistic site for delivering the station. Considerations included ownership of land, deliverability with DFT's timescales, potential connectivity and ease of access. The location of the station was one of the first fundamental things which needed determining so the work could be undertaken to be submitted to the DFT and to get us to the advanced stage where we are today. Following the exec decision back in DEC 21, over a year ago, CYC, Network Rail and consultancies have been working on the Towthorpe Road site. Everything that has been produced from design, modelling of passenger numbers, economic appraisal is based on this specific location. Opening the question of the location basically takes us back to the entire project, back to 2001, back to that map. It risks the funding that we secured and it effectively cancels the station project.
Councillor Pearson, thank you. Most entertaining.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Sorry, I've gone on. Please do support this motion.
Most entertaining. I wonder if we can have an equally entertaining seconder, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I couldn't follow that. No visual aids, but I will take the opportunity of just making 1 or 2 points as I briefly second this motion. I want to draw attention to the wider benefits, not just the benefit for the residents of Haxby and Wigginton, but also the surrounding communities on the north side of York will indeed benefit enormously. Indeed, the whole city will gain benefit. After extensive work by local councillors and council officers on what has been a decades-long ambition, more than that for some, for local communities, I'm delighted to see significant progress being made to build a new station. This, alongside our other major transport projects, such as the dualling of the Ring Road, will lead to improved connectivity and commuting opportunities across the city. The new station will provide direct access to the rail network for thousands of local residents in the north of York, improving access to new employment and new leisure opportunities. The delivery of this project will mean increased connectivity to new jobs and services, providing faster, more efficient and sustainable transport, helping to reduce traffic congestion and carbon emissions on our roads. There have been many false starts for the project, but we are now in a position to deliver a station that will truly benefit the whole city. And I will add a comment with regard to the location. To locate the station closer to the Ring Road, as is suggested elsewhere, is simply not feasible due to several significant considerations, including planning concerns over coalescence of developments in the area, over location in the flood zone, over insufficient area of land available, and the extra traffic pressures. The list goes on. Given that the Department for Transport, Network Rail, Member of Parliament, even the Prime Minister, all back the station, surely now is the time for all York councillors to get squarely behind the project and commit to its delivery, speak with one voice this evening to unlock the remaining funds. We have the land, we have the plans, we have the commitments from the council and the government to fund the project. We can't and won't waste this opportunity. I urge councillors to support the substantive motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Colwick. I now invite Councillor Douglas to move her amendment as altered. Thank you, Councillor Douglas. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Members, Labour has been committed to a station for Haxby since the proposal gained any serious reception with government. And you've been hearing for years we back an increase in sustainable transport and will always support options that make that a reality. It's important to make that point given the anticipated untruths that will likely follow in Liberal Democrat literature on this topic, following on from other recent examples such as Hull Road Ward, where lies are told with no scruples whatsoever. It's important the public knows this, as this will likely become a torrent from Liberal Democrats in the coming weeks. Rail travel is a more sustainable travel option in Haxby, if planned carefully, could help to move cars from the road and free up space for other road users. This will be crucially important as thousands of new homes are developed on the north side of York over the coming years, particularly as the road space created by anticipated dualling gradually disappears. The location of the station is crucial to maximise its potential and number of people using it. What the ideal location is, based on commuting patterns and directions of travel to and from Haxby and York, is unknown, as none of this data was presented at executive when the case was made for Haxby Station. I found that astonishing at this time and still do. I find it surprising any government would commit to several millions in station investment without good data, and maybe that's why York is still waiting. The current Talthorpe Road proposal, we know, will not benefit from any active travel investment as things stand. Being outside the village, it will be predominantly car dependent to attract its passengers. That threatens to undo much of the good work the station could achieve in terms of sustainable travel benefits, as well as the potential of the station in contributing to reducing carbon. It will also make the station more difficult to access for neighbouring communities like Huntington, New Earswick and Rawcliffe. It's clear that the views of the local town council representatives and the local population they represent have been ignored with the current site choice. And I find it troubling that the administration has opted to trample local public opinion in this way. It points to the "we know best" attitude we've become familiar with. In this case, it seeks to squash alternative views in the community that stands to be most affected by this proposal. Our amendment and press statements on this matter are clear. If we're successful in May, we'll review the location with council officers, Network Rail and the DfT and test Councillor Pearson's original assertion before he was told to remove it, that Talthorpe Road is the only deliverable site. If this proves accurate, then the station will be better there than nowhere. But if a more sustainable alternative exists, it will be explored and assessed more fully. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Do we have a seconder for that amendment, please? Councillor Norman, sorry, I didn't see you there, Councillor Norman.
Thank you. Friends, good public transport and good travel infrastructure is incredibly important. I grew up in a community with very poor transport infrastructure. On my way to school, there was a straightforward, if unreliable, bus, a few minutes walk down the road that I take every day. But in the evening, the bus didn't go that far. It was a 40-minute walk from the nearest bus stop down a busy road that's single track and has sharp bends and very, very few pavements. And I appreciate that might be less meaningful to some of you, but obviously I went to school somewhat less long ago than some. As winter nights set in, everyone's parents would get very worried about their kids using this route. And there would come a point when we got off the bus, there'd be a little queue of cars ready to collect us and take us, distributors, through to our community. And that's the problem with poor transport infrastructure. It leads to a near total reliance on cars. It causes frustration, longer journeys, and problems entirely predictable in the eyes of local communities, like Haxby Town Council, that foresee these problems and then have to deal with the failings themselves. I don't know where the best site might be for the station yet, but I do know that appeals to costs are often based on misled economics. It isn't okay to say that the cost of a station is just buying the land and building the place. The future cost also needs to be factored in because it is the city paying for this just over time, not 1 or 2 terms. The cost of when we decide we need a better pedestrian and cycle route to the station in the future, the cost when we decide we need better bus provision to the station in the future, and perhaps sadly the most likely, the cost of building a bigger car park around it when the one we initially plans proves too small, which I suspect is very feasible indeed. Good transport infrastructure changes lives, absolutely, and we need a station here. And it opens up opportunities, ambitions, and hope. But as I leave this council, I think it's important to remind all of us that we are here for the long-term future of our city, and we have a financial duty to the long-term future of this city. And we have a duty to get this decision right the first time, rather than expecting others to pick up the pieces.
Thank you, Councillor Norman. I now invite debate on the amendment, and of course, each member has 3 minutes in which to speak. Councillor Fisher.
Collier. Thank you very much indeed, Lord Mayor. Well, thank you to Councillor Pearson for his passionate speech and also for pinching my opening joke. I can perhaps put a little bit of history into this situation, because in the early 90s, there was an attempt to build a railway halt in Strensall. Developer approached Radio Council and offered a substantial sum of planning gain to build a halt in return for being allowed to build a fairly high density development based on a station precinct. His application was approved and things were moving towards success when local government reorganisation happened and Strensall was moved into the City of York. The Labour leader of the new council, Rod Hills, immediately decided the halt was in the wrong place and decided it should move to the original station site in Strensall. The fact that this was well away from the geographical centre of the village, was on land occupied by a business which didn't want to sell, this had no car parking and no funding, was of no concern to him. They thought they knew better than me as the local ward councillor. Eventually, it all fell through as the Lib Dem councillor said it inevitably would. The developer got his housing development, which is still called Station Square, but Strensall didn't get its halt. And now we see history threatening to repeat itself, move on 27 years and move the site to Haxby. Now, the campaign for a station in Haxby has been going on since I first moved there in 1983. The allotment site was favoured then, but the difficulty of relocating the allotments and the unwillingness of the owners to sell the land ended any hope of that site being used. This time, new sites were explored and assessed by professional officers, 5 in total. I find it astonishing that Councillor Douglas says that nothing was presented, because I've watched that executive meeting and there was a clear report, and I believe there was somebody who looked very like Councillor Douglas sitting at the executive meeting. December the 19th, 2021 was the date. Anyway, putting that aside, 3, including the site south of Haxby, were all dismissed for clear reasons such as traffic concerns, mainly the backing up of traffic onto the A1237. The other day, I was actually stuck in a queue on the A1237, even when the level crossing was open, was closed, just for a normal train to go through. So it would be horrific if it had to be shut for longer due to a train being in the station. And the other thing is the potential serious difficulty of getting planning permission, because the site would be coalescing New Earswick and Haxby, which could be a serious issue. Now, the Towthorpe Road site was clearly the preferred site for many reasons. Mainly, it serves a wider catchment area for walking and cycling. By introducing the amendment, Labour seem to be saying they have no faith in our office to do an evaluation. Well, I do, and a further technical review will doubtless yield exactly the same outcome, but delay the project. Labour also seems to be suggesting that Haxby Town Council views are paramount, but this station has to serve a much wider area, including Wigginton, Earswick, Strensall, and all the villages further north in North Yorkshire, in order to be a success. Strensall Parish Council has already indicated support for the Towthorpe Road site, and Strensall has 6,000 residents. Now, the council took the far-sighted decision to buy the land at Towthorpe Road, so avoiding one of the main obstacles to progression. Even if the allotment site had been preferred, the allotments could have been
Councillor Fisher, if you could draw to a close, please.
Let's do that, sorry. Basically, any delay to this will put the project at risk, and we cannot risk that.
Yeah.
I urge you to reject the amendment and support the substantive motion.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Councillor Hollier, I think you were next.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Erin, Chris and Tony have already set out how transformational the delivery of the station would be for Haxby, Wigginton and the northern communities of York. So I'll restrict myself to addressing the changes proposed point by point. I'm afraid I'm going to repeat a little what Ed said, but we've already heard, and said 100 times to Labour these issues, and they haven't listened so far. So what's 101 times? Labour's first change is to state that a limited number of sites were considered. In reality, as we've heard, 5 locations were evaluated: Strensall, Tothorpe Road, Station Road, the A1237 and New Earswick. This wasn't a limited number of sites. These were the only feasible locations that could have been looked at. You can only put a station where there is a railway line. And we found that all but Tothorpe Road have significant show-stopping issues. The second point on the prematurity of the land acquisition. This was in reality an inspired bit of business, purchasing at a good price the land, substantially de-risking the project. Land acquisition was and this purchase has mitigated that risk. So the station not go ahead, the council will still own the land and it could be used instead for as allotments or for tree planting. Thirdly, on consultation with residents, this is perhaps where Labour most sort of tie themselves in knots, claiming both at the same time that this is a vote-winning exercise for the Lib Dems, but also that residents don't want it. I'm not quite sure how I figure that one. It is clear from the consultations and the surveys and anecdotally from the thousands of doors I have knocked on in Haxby and Wigginton that residents by a significant majority support the project, and there is little doubt in people's minds both then and now where the site was to be. Labour's fourth point on the ease of access. Clearly, wherever a site is located, it will be nearer some people and further from some others. The locations actually have very little difference between them in terms of the centres of population. On the flexibility of timescales, given the need to secure funding from the government, we have to work to their timescales. The minor flexibility the government has shown so far, from asking for the station to be finished in March 24 to substantially finished by then, is down to the confidence they have in the project as it stands, confidence that would evaporate if the project is paused. The overall thrust of Labour's amendment, as Councillor Douglas has said, is to argue for a delay in order to reassess the site selection process. However, since the site was chosen, a robust comparison 18 months ago, all the work undertaken by the council, Network Rail and the consultants has been based specifically on the station being located at Tothorpe Road. Everything that has been produced, from modelling passenger numbers to economic appraisals, is based on this site. We'd be throwing all that work away. Reopening the question of the sites would just reset the entire project back to the start. And the idea that the government...
Councillor Hollier, I must draw you to a close, I'm afraid.
So the idea that government will in any way be...
It's a very generous 3 minutes, Councillor Hollier.
Ridiculous. Thank you.
I do want to get other people in as well, if you don't mind. Thank you very much for that contribution. Councillor Doughty, I think you were next. Councillor De Gorn,
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I am of the opinion that the council has made mistakes in the process with this project and should certainly have involved Haxby Town Council right from the start, rather than after consultation had begun, as that gives the impression the council had already made up its mind. However, having said that, it would be extremely unfair and churlish of me not to say that I think the council are right in their choice of preferred site, when I agree with the bullet point statement that in reality, it is the only realistic location for delivering the station. I've said before that I believe this location with a road close to a long straight section of railway would make the optimum site for a park and rail railway station, with space for dedicated parking and cycle racks. It would serve not only Haxby, but indeed also residents of my own Strensall ward and beyond to the likes of Sheriff Hutton and other Rydale villages. This would mitigate the loss of allotments and parking difficulties that would occur on nearby residential streets if it was located at the site near the old railway station, which is now very much constrained. Likewise, I'm of the opinion that the land sometimes referred to closer to the ring road between York Road level crossing and the A1237 would not have sufficient space, even if the land was available. There may not even be space for train unit clearance when in longer formations from the track circuits that could affect the level crossing, which in turn may lead to extra significant tailbacks on the road. A park and rail station on Tothorpe Road should take a not insignificant amount of traffic from the roads. It's not just for people going into York. The train service is offered with 3 destinations, including Leeds and Manchester, means public transport is helped to become the logical, convenient choice. On-site parking should be pitched sensibly and not used as a cash cow. I'd encourage free parking for those who purchase a rail season ticket, for example. In an ideal world, the bus service which currently terminates at West Nooks in Haxby could be extended via Towthorpe Road to Strensall, potentially making that more financially sustainable too, and delivering a side benefit to residents as there are far more extensive amenities and facilities in Haxby. Obviously, I'm thinking of my own residents there. I'd also like the council to consider how access for cyclists can be improved through to Strensall so that we can have some joined up thinking on infrastructure, but I appreciate we have to start with the initial steps. Access from the Haxby side needs good accessibility by foot and cycle too, of course. I'd encourage any members who are thinking about not supporting the substantive motion today to think very carefully. We have at this moment a spade-ready offering with significant taxpayer money already having been spent. We need to turn that spend into investment for our residents and the city. York Conservatives will be happy to support the pitch to government for the remaining release of funding needed from the Restoring Your Railway Fund. Any sniff of doubt or delay, and crikey, the boat has been missed on several previous occasions for Haxby. Let's not set it back another generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doughty. And the next on my list is Councillor de Gorne.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Oh, I wasn't planning to speak on this item, but I think it's such an important issue that does need addressing, and certainly very much surprised to be in wholehearted agreement with the contribution we just heard from Councillor Doughty. This does bring me major concerns, whilst some of the fine words in the Labour amendment about it being critical for sustainable low carbon alternatives to the car, tackling pollution and so forth are indeed very true. The fundamental point which has been made in support of the Labour amendment about calling for a review of the location is seriously putting at risk all the work that has gone into the process to date. And I would urge everyone in this room to put aside party point scoring for the election in the interests of the people of this city and in the interests of sustainable transport, and support the work that's already been done, identifying Towthorpe as a suitable location, actually taking the initiative to secure that land. And as you've heard, the original site is occupied by allotment holders who would not want to be moved at short notice in order to facilitate, even if they supported the project as a whole, would clearly want the situation that we have at the moment, which is that the site has been identified, some initial funding has been secured, the DFT is behind it. Although the timescales are very tight, it is still a realistic prospect that we could deliver a station at Haxby through this commitment, but not by making it a political football in the forthcoming election. And therefore, on that basis, whilst a lot of the words in the Labour amendment I would wholeheartedly endorse, I can't support the amendment as it stands because of the comments that have been made in support of it, that the Labour would create a pause at a late stage rather than at the early stage when the site was originally selected and went through the executive. That was the time to raise the issue. That decision's been made, and we now need to move on and deliver the station for the people of Haxby and for the wider catchment in the city of York.
Thank you, Councillor de Gorne. I believe I've got Councillor Wells next.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I can promise you that you're not going to have to tell me to shut up after a few minutes. I'm old enough to remember New Ayswick Station. Not only remember it, I travelled on it and it was brilliant. I loved it. It meant the start of a day trip out to the seaside. And so I welcome the opportunity for Haxby to get their station. However, all we're asking is that you talk to people. You say that you've done it, but so many people in Haxby are telling us that you haven't. We want to support them. We want you to talk to the town council. So that's basically it. We want them to have the same opportunities that I had when I was a child. It's now a pub, so, which is a shame. Okay, that's all.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Wells. I did not realise you'd finished there. Councillor Melly is next on my list.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I wasn't planning on speaking, but I wanted to respond to some of the things that have been said as part of this debate. Yes, there is wide support for having a station in Haxby. There's a huge need for it. Local people have wanted it for an incredibly long time. Nobody's disputing that. It's taken a long time to get to this point, and that's what makes this decision so important. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and the location needs to be got right. This decision needs to be made in the best interest, the long-term interests of the city and the people of Haxby and the other villages in the north. And it's been claimed that the consultation done and the resident engagement done shows that people support this location, but the consultation didn't even ask residents whether they support the administration's choice of location. It just asked whether people support there being a station in Haxby, which we all know, of course they do. The modelling numbers of people using the station that was done as part of the business case was done using data from the consultation, which asked people how often they would use the station for various purposes like commuting or leisure. It didn't ask any questions about whether people would be more likely to use it at other proposed locations. The modelling data is done based on there being a station in Haxby, not based on this location. I just wanted to address those points.
Thank you, Councillor Melly. And the last on my list, I think, is Councillor Crawshaw. Councillor Crawshaw, would you like to speak, please?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just briefly, I'm really surprised to hear the Executive Member for Transport say that he wasn't planning to speak on a motion that was a key transport initiative of his own administration. I find that quite bizarre. I just want to really draw your attention back to the points made by Councillor Norman, because what we're seeking to do with the amendment is make sure that this council doesn't steamroller through something which builds in car dependency. It's really, really obvious to everybody who is looking at this. Now, for some people, they're quite comfortable with driving to the railway station. That's fine. We can have a discussion about that, or whether or not we think that's all right or not. But what we're proposing to create here is potentially years and years and years of transport problems and additional carbon emissions. You have to think bigger than just the thing that's right in front of you sometimes. And unfortunately, I don't think that that's what's gone on. The data, not the date, Councillor Fisher, the data is really critical. It's the data that has been missing that Councillor Douglas is referring to. And that is why we're looking at wanting to consider again, if we get all of that data and all of that data on the wider impacts is still pointing at particular locations, fine, that's great. But I'm sick of being in this council, whether it be on a planning application, whether it be on a decision like this, and being told that unless you vote for this option here, that a lot of people are saying has got a lot of problems with it, then the whole thing's going to go away or going to be lost. That's not the way that the world has operated. We sat on that planning application for York Central. Councillor Douglas, I know, was sat next to me, and we were told again and again and again that if that application wasn't approved right there and then, all the money would be lost, everything wouldn't happen. We had to go ahead with it, otherwise the bridge wouldn't get built by 2021, because that's when the WICA funding ran out. Things change. If a good plan is brought forward and it meets objectives and it delivers on sustainability and it delivers on carbon reduction and it delivers on sustainable transport, then those projects are funded. That's the key point that we're trying to get across. And for anybody talking about politicking again and playing politics again, let's just have a look at the type of language that's being used, the type of things that are being said to discredit the individuals who are speaking out about this. And let's think again about the type of discourse that we want to have in this council.
Thank you, Councillor Crawshaw, and I think that winds up the debate. Councillor Pearson, do you wish to reply to any of the points raised?
Do I reply to this bit or do I reply to the substantive motion?
Both. As you wish.
Okay, I will, Lord Mayor, if that's all right. So the position of, to pick up the Hackney Town Council point, I'm actually a Haxby Town Council member, and their position is quite clear that they would work with City of York Council wherever the station goes to make the best of it. Active travel links, they are absolutely indeed crucial, which is why we're proposing a pedestrian cycling path from this Wharfdale estate in Haxby. It's why we continue to seek funding to ensure that it is connected. The survey that's been mentioned and the consultation work that's been mentioned, that did include drawings of both station sites that were proposed. So it's inaccurate to say that the people haven't been consulted on the station site. With regards to its location on the sort of edge of York, it's actually about a 10-minute walk from my house, which is right behind the co-op, which is right in the middle of Haxby. Yorkshire stations at places like Thirsk, Hunmanby and Howden are actually twice as far away from their communities. And I'm sure if you took away those stations from those communities, they'd be very upset. So yes, I think that's all I'd like to say on the amendment. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Let's move now to the vote then on the amendment. If you wish to vote for the amendment, please show.
That's 16 in favour.
Okay. Those against the amendment, please. Ready?
That's 26.
26. Any abstentions, members? No? Okay. That then shows that the amendment is lost, I'm afraid. So we will now move on to debate the substantive motion. And each member again has 3 minutes if you wish to avail yourselves of that opportunity. Is there any debate on it? Or shall we move straight to the vote? Councillor Cuthbertson, I beg your pardon. Yeah.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's good to see that an amendment which would have derailed the Haxby Station project has been refused by council, and we can return to debating the substantive motion if anybody else wishes to speak. Perhaps we can now remind ourselves that the intention of this motion is both to note the significant progress made to date on this project and also to ask all councillors in this council to back the project and ensure its delivery. Without the leadership of the Liberal Democrat-led administration and the work of local councillors, I'm not going to mention the ward councillors, but 3 of us are here, we would only be speaking about this project as an ambition instead of as the deliverable project that has actually been achieved so far. And it's further than we've ever managed before. The full backing for the project already given by Department for Transport and Network Rail reinforces the project's comprehensive business case and emphasises the work that has taken place in progressing it to this point. This next stage of the project will cover the planning application and determination as well as the remaining funding application. And it's on the issue of DFT funding that we must now speak with one voice in calling for the remaining funding to be released as soon as possible. We've been led to believe so far that an announcement on this funding is expected fairly shortly. So we need to ensure that ministers see that the whole council and our city are right behind the project. If politicking or internal bickering were to harm our case and thus our confidence in the project, I believe that the residents of North York, and in reality, the rest of the city, would neither forget nor forgive us. My colleagues have described at some length the importance of this station, the clear reasons for the choice of location, and the significant progress made to date. So I want to reiterate just how important it is now to get on with working together to deliver a station for the benefit of the residents of North York and the whole city. So let's accept the technical judgments made by professionals in their fields and move on together, fully backing the station project to ensure we deliver it next year. Please support the motion. Thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbertson. The next person to speak, the next member to speak is Councillor Mason, please.
Thank you, Lord Chair. Asked to move to the vote.
Oh, well, let me speak first. Then we can move on.
That's not how it works.
Lord Mayor, I think one thing we've been missing when we've gone through a lot of this is actually the economic impact, and that's what I want to touch on very briefly. I think we're missing out this connectivity. We're about to have this fantastic devolution deal. We've got the possibility of linking up everyone across up into North Yorkshire. And actually the jobs we're going to create on York Central and the work that's already going on there now, providing that link for people in the north of the city to come straight into the heart of the city, where we know at least 2,500 cabinet office jobs, plus all the other things we'll be developing, the housing there. It's going to offer that real two-way stream of transport, which will really make it easy for us, as long as helping us with our climate targets that we're keen to hit. A real sustainable form of transport, which I think we should all be supporting and backing.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. And Councillor Melly, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to reiterate for the 100th time now that we absolutely support a station in Haxby. It's just a shame that it's being done in a way that isn't in the best interests of local people. It's being done in a rush so the Liberal Democrats can put it on a leaflet as their one achievement after 8 years of failure in administration.
Thank you, Councillor Melly. And Councillor Pearson, you have the second opportunity to reply if you so wish. 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just to say thank you to everyone. And actually, you know, despite the conversation tonight, actually, there is cross-party support for this project, and it is wonderful to see that. And I hope that long may that continue. I've been overwhelmed by the support of residents for this project, and actually, despite what's been said, the feedback that I get from residents is that they actually quite like where the station site is proposed, and I think there are a few vocal people who have different opinions, as ever with these things. But we can't risk derailing the project. We must now work together to ensure that it gets delivered. I'd urge councillors to get behind this motion and support the project. I'd just like to say a massive thank you to Keith Aston in particular for supporting this project throughout, and a massive thanks to you, Lord Mayor, for chairing this council for the last year. So thank you all ever so much.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Right, let's move to the vote now on the substantive motion. Those wishing to vote for the motion, please show.
(42), Lord Mayor.
Okay. Are there any against? And are there any abstentions?
1, Lord Mayor.
Okay. That motion is therefore carried, and that concludes the section on motions. Now we're running perilously close to the guillotine. Am I right?
You are.
Monitoring officer.
Lord Mayor.
So we have
2 minutes.
2 minutes to take questions to the leader or executive members at item 9. So who was first?
Councillor Wardby.
Councillor Wardby.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We have frequently discussed our concerns over the impact of short-term lets in the city. Could the executive member for housing outline work that has taken place to ensure anyone running such a business is aware of their responsibilities and make sure to respect their local community?
Thank you for that question, Councillor Woodby. This is certainly an issue that's a concern for many residents, particularly in the central wards, including my own, but I know it also isn't limited to those wards. And whilst for a tourist city like York, a certain number of holiday lets are clearly expected to play a part in our local economy, I think the growing numbers are causing two main concerns. One being the impact of large groups and party houses on neighbourhoods, and the other, the potential impact on the availability and affordability of housing for York residents. So the council's current powers to tackle these issues are currently limited by national legislation, but we are progressing everything we can. A guidance brochure for owners of holiday lets has been produced, setting out their responsibilities to neighbouring residents, as well as their legal obligations. The guidance covers the need to manage the behaviour of occupants, noise levels, waste disposal, etc., etc. And it also advises all owners of new holiday lets to check if they do need planning permission. Whilst we really need the government to bring forward a change to the national planning use classes, and ideally a licensing scheme for holiday lets, in the meantime, there are cases where the change to a holiday let is so substantial that it does count as a material change of use. And in those cases, we can and do take enforcement action. At the same time, the council is now committed to building the evidence base on the impact of the increased numbers of holiday lets on both local communities and housing affordability in preparation for any government changes that do come forward, which we have lobbied for as a council, to the planning system and potentially a registration or ideally a licensing scheme. So those are the things that the actions that we are taking.
Right, that does bring us to the guillotine. Can I thank Councillor Wilby for the question, Councillor Crackhill for that answer? Can we now gallop through the rest of the agenda, please? Item 10, can we take that as moved and seconded, please? Yes? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Item 11, is that agreed, please? Moved and seconded, yeah? Yeah. Yes. Item 12, pay policy, is that agreed, members? Just take a vote. Okay, let's move to a quick vote on that then. Those who are for it, please show. (26) in favour, those against? One. And those abstaining? 15, okay. That is therefore carried, I have to say. And that brings us almost close of the meeting. I just want to say a few words as we wrap up. This is my last full council as Lord Mayor, and therefore the last which I've had the honour to chair. It might even be my last full council in any capacity, depending on what happens in May. As we prepare to throw ourselves at the tender mercies of the electorate, I want to wish all members, those stepping down, those who will be returned, and those who will not be returned, for all their service to this great and ancient city of York. I wish every member all the very best for whatever path you might take in the future. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.